Idiot, don't trouble me with petty things. Arrest him, interrogate him for the mastermind, then execute him on the spot. Red Skull barked. He hadn't slept in days, obsessively trying to root out Shocker's spies. Yes? The secretary, seeing his fury, dared not say another word and backed away cautiously. Red Skull collapsed back onto the bed and took a few minutes to calm down. He was almost drifting off when the secretary burst in, out of breath. All welcoming forces annihilated, he panted. I didn't even get to relay your orders before this came in. What did you say? Red Skull shot upright, his sleep evaporating. You couldn't handle a single intruder? What use are any of you? He ignored the officers trembling and rushed to the monitoring room, face grim. Who was this mysterious attacker? The U.S. military? A foreign ally? On the screen, an armored figure, entirely blue, strode through the base. He carried a sword in his left hand and a gun in his right, cutting a path from the South Heaven Gate, from the base's South District, all the way to the North District. The soldiers' counterattacks were not useless, but the armored man never stood and traded fire. He charged on sight, moving so fast he rarely paused to aim. Under the armored man's rapid-firing energy weapon, the troops could only dodge, hide, and fire ineffectively. His speed was like that of a sprint champion. Even hits only scraped his armor. By the time they could focus fire, he was already in close quarters. Then there came the sound, a thunderous, bone-jarring impact. No one could withstand that kind of 1-2-ton blow. It was more than twice whatever punch record they could picture. Instant death on contact, grievous injury even on a graze. Once he entered their formations, it was carnage. In extreme fear, some soldiers even fired blindly and hit their comrades, only increasing the toll. Bastards! Red Skull swore, slamming his fist on the console. Where are the armored vehicles? Where are the tanks? Surround him. We've deployed tanks, sir, but the operator stammered. The intruder is taking indoor routes. The tanks can't get to him. Indoor routes? Red Skull's jaw tightened. How did this man know the base's interior so well? Only a traitor with high clearance could navigate like that, someone who had explored most areas. Damn it, Shocker again. The suspicion hit him like ice. It had been Shocker who had caused him so many problems before. He barked an order. Mark his path on the map. Where is he heading? The soldier traced the route. Red Skull's face went cold. It was the worst possibility. Although circuitous, the destination was unmistakable, the Tesseract's storage vault. Red Skull didn't hesitate. The Tesseract was Hydra's highest priority. Nothing could be allowed to happen to it. Gao Li stopped before a heavy door. Even in the protective G3 armor, he was battered and bruised. His whole body ached and sweat drenched him. The suit's damage alerts filled the compound eye display. If nothing else went wrong, the Tesseract should be behind this door, he muttered. His method for locating it had been simple. Mark the restricted zones he couldn't enter, then probe each one with connection magic arrays. The arrays couldn't transport him through entirely, but they could let part of his body pass, enough to check inside. He'd even used them to remotely create the G3 unit in the warehouse. He'd planned to spirit the Tesseract away by connection magic, but right here, the arrays wouldn't activate. It felt like severe spatial interference, consistent with what he remembered the Tesseract being, a space stone, constantly active and disturbing space. If he could switch off its activation device, he might be able to take it. Creating a distraction to get a clone out with Dr. Erskine was just a fortunate side effect. Alohomora. He thrust the destroyer ultra-high-frequency vibration sword at the door. The blade vibrated 2 million times per minute. Even the sturdiest barriers were like paper to it, and the door tore open in a man-sized hole. A faint blue light spilled through the breach. Gao Li was about to step inside when the wall exploded outward. Tanks had smashed straight through, and Red Skull's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. He had driven a tank into the inner facility and flattened over 20 layers of wall. The man was desperate. No stopping! Red Skull shouted. Gao Li's instinct was rebellion. He lunged and threw the destroyer at the tank. Red Skull was no slouch. He targeted the main cannon and fired. The high-frequency blade sliced through the cannon like butter, but the ensuing blue energy blast still hurled Gao Li backward over 10 meters. Alarms flooded his visual display. External armor destroyed, generator severely impacted, output down 70%, battery modules damaged, remaining capacity critical. He could hardly move. He couldn't discard the armor like Hojo, else he'd die completely exposed. There was only one choice left. Reinforcements are coming. You can't win. Surrender, and you might live if you confess. Red Skull climbed out of the wrecked tank, trying to keep his composure. He coveted such advanced armor. Capturing it could be a major coup. Through the broken hole, more Hydra soldiers were gathering. Gao Li smiled and rose slowly, trembling but composed. He removed his helmet. The face beneath was a fabricated likeness, Hoffman's face. "Hoffman," Red Skull barked. "It's you! Why? Why would you betray the great Hydra and hide behind this ridiculous mask?" "No," the man called Hoffman shouted to the crowd. "For years I suppressed myself, wearing a disguise in Hydra and forgetting who I really was. But Shocker saved me. I was inspired by their ideal, to lead humanity to evolution and grant it true happiness. That is the path we must follow." Red Skull's expression turned to ice. "So it's Shocker. Their spies never end. No matter how many we execute, they keep appearing." Over the past month, he'd already executed countless Hydra members. Time and again, steadfast-looking comrades turned out to be traitors, dying in tears and cowardice, yet claiming to be innocent. What sort of organization was Shocker that could inspire such devotion? Hoffman's speech answered that. "John Schmidt," Hoffman said, addressing Red Skull by his name, "yes, your tyranny and violence have killed many. I, like them, am ready to die." Surrounded by the newly arrived soldiers' complex stares, Hoffman posed like a martyr. "My flesh may rot and my bones be gnawed, but not my spirit. Behind this mask there is no mere flesh and blood, but a sacred ideal. Ideals cannot be destroyed." Red Skull couldn't let him continue. "Kill him," he ordered. But before the command reached its full weight, Hoffman leapt forward and shouted, "You will never truly kill me. My spirit lives on." He activated the G3 armor's self-destruct device. As its creator, Gao Li built that failsafe into his design. The clone inside would be consumed, its magic dispersed and poured into the coming explosion. Boom! The blast seared everything. The scene branded itself into the memories of everyone there. Red Skull dove behind the tank, using it as cover from the detonation. He was a super soldier and reacted quickly, but even he broke into a cold sweat, not because of Hoffman's courage, but because of the implications. Shocker's brainwashing and infiltration into Hydra were deeper and more effective than he had feared. In a hidden laboratory, Gao Li laughed softly. The internal purges had sown distrust throughout Hydra. Where fear spread, new loyalties took root. Shocker's name had become a rallying point. Gao Li projected his consciousness again into clone number 4, which was disguised as another Hydra cadre and had lured the real Hoffman to a secluded spot without surveillance. "Conrad, what do you want with me?" Hoffman asked, unease in his voice. The man who looked like a cadre, no before Gao Li, smiled strangely. "I've come to show you a treasure," he said. He produced a silver-bodied pistol unlike anything Hoffman had seen. "Is this from the weapons research department? It's not like their style. Could it be Legendo Noah's work?" Hoffman guessed. "No, this is called the Victory Hypergun," No before said. "With it you can defeat anything. Well, it isn't fully developed yet." He explained in clipped terms. By swapping magazines, the Victory Hypergun could, in theory, fire flares, tranquilizer darts, tracking rounds, laser cartridges, barrier rounds, basically a universal sidearm. For now, it only had the basics. Hoffman listened, half understanding. "Sounds powerful, but why show me this?" "No." Gao Li lifted the gun. "So you can die with understanding." He pulled the trigger. Bang! A single shot cracked through the air. Hoffman collapsed, a bloody hole blooming in his terrified face. "Connect!" someone barked. Gao Li number 4 opened the connecting magic circle and kicked Hoffman's corpse through. Living beings couldn't be transferred whole by that magic, but a corpse wasn't technically alive, so it passed. On the far side, the Red Skull, watching the scene through the monitors, stared at the ruined body, then dismissed the Hydra soldiers who had rushed in. Relief warred with caution. The immediate crisis was over, and a gaping hole now exposed where the Tesseract had been kept. That was top secret. Fewer witnesses meant fewer problems. Still, the always cautious Red Skull ordered a sweep of the area and called the monitoring room for confirmation. There were no more intruders. He let himself relax enough to step into the chamber and check the Tesseract. Fortunately, it was intact. To break into the base alone, Hoffman was either very brave or very stupid, he muttered. Then a hair-raising instinct spiked up his spine. Before he could react, laser fire thudded into the wall behind him. He rolled, barely avoiding the shots, but the rounds tore into his nearby trusted men. They fell, faces frozen in surprise and pain. "Who's there?" Red Skull hissed, furious and scrambling for cover. From a distance, Gowley No. 5 made a small surprise sound. His plan had been simple and coldly clever. Send a clone disguised as a lone intruder close, open a connection to pull out a fresh G3 armor, slip it on, then ambush Red Skull with a laser rifle. He'd even left an extra gap in the timing to let Red Skull check his surroundings and be lulled into complacency. It had worked, up to a point. The dead men were proof. But Red Skull hadn't been as complacent as hoped. He dodged the ambush. A crimson-fisted blow struck the G3 visor like a meteor. The impact nearly threw Gowley off his feet. The gun was ripped from his hand by a swift kick. The clone staggered back, his chest heavy with the realization. He had never faced a super soldier before. The raw physical force was beyond his expectations. In his previous life, he'd seen calculations. If Captain America could hold a Black Hawk, his pulling strength would be measured in tons. Punching power would be similar. This Red Skull had that same superhuman build. So much power, Gowley thought, stomach sinking. He must have 3 to 4 tons of punching force, several times G3s. Red Skull sneered, clenching his hands. Another petty scoundrel from Shocker? Such audacity. Fine, let me show you the power of a god. He called himself a god with the usual grandiosity and loathing for mere mortals. Gowley realized reasoning alone wouldn't work. He switched to his main consciousness, suppressed the panic, and closed in with his sword, the Destroyer, just like Hoffman had tried. Even super soldiers bled. Gowley slashed with everything he had, but Red Skull was a skilled fighter. He avoided the blade, then knocked it aside in a flurry of strikes that forced Gowley backward. When Gowley kicked, Red Skull caught his leg with one hand and flung him aside like a rag doll. How dare you overestimate yourself and challenge a god? Red Skull spat as he kicked a dent into the G3 chest plate and planted his boot on the struggling clone. I will flay you alive and teach you pain and blood. Gowley, pinned under that boot, didn't respond with a cry of defeat. He looked up, calm, almost amused. You said, no matter how many come? Red Skull's brow twitched. Then his eyes widened in disbelief as 6 figures strode in behind the doorway, each in the same G3 armor Gowley wore. Red Skull's earlier sweep had found nothing. These shouldn't have been there. They were, the Gowley clones produced by replication magic, and their armor, pulled out of the warehouse through the connecting magic, was part of Plan B. When brute force wouldn't win, overwhelm with numbers. Red Skull, today is your death, the leading Gowley called, pointing. What? 6 of you? How deep has Shocker's infiltration gone? Red Skull snarled. The clone only grinned and pointed at himself with a thumb. Not Hydra anymore. We're the gloriously righteous Ultraman 6 brothers of Shocker. Zaffi, Ultraman, 7, Jack, Ace, Taro. They struck poses in a ridiculous synchronized flourish that somehow carried ironclad menace. Led by Zaffi Gowley, they surged forward. One of them latched onto Red Skull's shin. Heh, don't run. You said you were vulnerable. What are you afraid of? Red Skull's face went redder with rage as he yanked to free himself, but the grab cost him half a beat. Taro Gowley leapt in for an Ultraman-style suplex, enough to topple normal opponents, but Red Skull's mass and raw power only forced him back a few steps. Still, that few steps was enough. The rest of the Gowleys closed in, each taking a designated limb. Taku, grapple! Taku, headlock! Taku, grab his feet! They shouted as they moved, closing like practiced wrestlers. Taro locked the left leg, Ace took the right. Jack wrapped around the left arm, 7 grabbed the right. Ultraman Gowley secured the head while Zaffi locked down the torso from behind in a powerful bear hold. The division of labor was perfect. Red Skull, for all his single-blow strength, found himself immobilized. Bastards, let go of me, I'll kill you, he roared, rage bouncing off the restraints. Gowley hauled himself free from under Red Skull's boot and slapped him hard across the face. So loud, he said dryly. Since you're so talkative, tell us, what secrets does the Tesseract hide? Maybe I'll make your death quick. Red Skull snarled a curse, but before he could finish, Gowley rammed the destroyer into his mouth. The high-frequency blades sheared flesh and shattered teeth. Blood, tongues, and pieces of bone flooded the air. Red Skull howled, helpless, unable to speak. "I didn't actually plan to get anything useful from your mouth," Gowley said, shrugging. "Just wanted to see what you'd do." Then he swung, severing the head in one decisive arc. Red Skull's body went limp and slid from their hold. Gowley didn't take chances. He hacked and quartered the corpse into many pieces until there was no chance of revival. He stepped back, wiping the blade clean with a grimace. "Ugh, even with scent filters and image masking, this is disgusting," he muttered. "Soldiers will be here soon. Let's finish this quickly." He ordered the clones to split up. 3 to dig for classified data, 1 to shut down the Tesseract's activation device, 1 to manage the connecting magic, and 1 to retrieve the Tesseract itself. As expected, once the activation device was shut down, the field around the Tesseract would shrink, and the connecting magic could work more smoothly. The 3 data teams began sorting through locked files. Things were moving in the right direction. Then Zoffy Gowley's voice cut through the coordinated efficiency, sharp and frustrated. "Oh, damn it. What is it?" someone asked. "This Tesseract can't fit into the connecting magic circle." "Huh." Section 43, Number 3, Gowley, Legendo Noah, froze and hurried to check. The Tesseract, when not activated, did not project any obvious space magic field, but its mere presence still interfered with spatial magic. "Is the Space Stone incompatible with space magic from other systems?" he wondered. Gowley's head ached. Stealing the Tesseract outright was near impossible. Unlike Erskine, who had fled, the Tesseract was Hydra's top priority. Its importance was incalculable. If he tried to walk out of the base with it, several divisions would be on his tail in minutes. Right now, only 6 Kamen Rider G3 units can fight. That's probably not enough. He weighed his options for a few seconds and decided to proceed cautiously. He was still hiding inside the Hydra base. There would be chances. Before the Hydra soldiers arrived, Gowley returned all the retrieved data and the G3 armor to the storage vault and deactivated every replication spell. All that remained on the scene were the corpses of Red Skull and his confidants, quietly rotting and stinking. P.S. Thank you to Talent Dispatcher of the Heavens for the 200-point reward. Chapter 69, Marvel Gene. When the main Hydra force arrived and found corpses everywhere, their shock was total, especially at the sight of Red Skull. He'd been mutilated beyond recognition. "What do we do?" the leading captain stammered. Hydra had lost its leader. Where did they go from here? Report to the Führer. Who would command them? For a moment, the captain even thought of that secret society called Shocker. A small figure stepped from behind the ranks. The captain recognized him as Arnim Zola, one of Hydra's scientists. Zola, suppressing his own nausea, produced a sealed order from his coat and showed it to the officer. "I'm taking command. None of this information is to be spread. Do not panic. Mr. Schmidt is safe." "Safe?" The captain glanced again at the mutilated corpse. "He looks dead." Zola didn't elaborate. He simply barked, "Follow orders." "Hail Hydra!" the soldiers shouted, then fell back and sealed the breach. Once they had gone, Zola let out a breath and stared at Red Skull with a tangled expression. "It hasn't been tested, but I hope it works. Otherwise, I'll have to turn to Shocker, too. I didn't expect this to blow up so badly." At a Hydra facility remote from headquarters, a colossal mechanism automatically powered up the moment Red Skull's heart ceased. At the heart of the device sat a massive containment. Inside floated a Frankenstein-like body, stitched together from flesh and machinery. Look closely, and the face bore a 3-point resemblance to Red Skull. The body's eyes snapped open. "Damn Shocker! This hatred and humiliation I will avenge in this life." A furious roar issued from the tank as bubbles rose through the nutrient fluid, Red Skull's consciousness alive inside it. Red Skull's uniqueness wasn't merely that he had been the first super soldier. During a period of suspended animation years earlier, he had been exposed to an unreplicable experimental gas. The gas mutated his mind, rendering his consciousness effectively indestructible and able to transfer between hosts. This mental ability also granted him an uncanny sixth sense, the very reason he'd been able to evade Number 3 Gowley's ambush. In another parallel universe, Red Skull had even used this power to swap his mind into Professor X's corpse to gain telepathic powers. World War II-era Germany, however, lacked the scientific base to build perfect new bodies. Zola had assembled a mechanically augmented vessel, part machine, part flesh. With a sharp crack, Red Skull smashed the tank with a mechanical arm and climbed out, dripping nutrient fluid. He toyed with the control panel, called Zola at headquarters, then donned his usual human skin mask. "Mr. Schmidt, you've truly been resurrected," Zola breathed, stunned. The resurrection plan had only existed on paper. To see it succeed was a feat that bordered on the divine. Red Skull snorted. "Isn't it obvious? I have evolved beyond death. I will be immortal, as Hydra should be. And the serum I asked for, did you bring it? I've prepped the equipment. I need you to help operate it, Zola." Zola nodded. "Yes, Erskine escaped, but a sealed batch of super soldier serum still remains. I retrieved it." Red Skull's face darkened. Veins stood out on his forehead. "He actually ran, that traitorous Erskine. Hydra is leaking traitors faster and faster." His perfect Hydra seemed full of betrayal. For a moment, Red Skull felt helpless, as if no one around him could be trusted, comparably infuriating to certain Japanese organizations in a neighboring universe. He shuddered inwardly. Then, remembering something, he asked, "With such a commotion at the base, what about Legendo Noah?" Zola frowned, then answered honestly. "Surveillance shows Legendo Noah behaved himself. He looked around when the alarm sounded, but he didn't make any suspicious moves or try to flee." Red Skull's taut brows relaxed. Legendo Noah's calm meant loyalty. He had passed the test. In Red Skull's mind, Noah was more trustworthy than many Hydra executives. The betrayals stung, but at least he had someone to rely on. "I must promote Noah," he decided privately. After taking the recovered super soldier serum and regaining a formidable physique, Red Skull re-emerged to steady morale and restore order in Hydra. The first person he saw was number 3, Gao Li. Gao Li's heart leaped. The man before him was clearly undead. He almost showed it, but his acting held. Shock melted into controlled surprise. "Mr. Schmidt, thank goodness you're all right. I heard the base alarms for so long. I was worried." Red Skull smiled condescendingly and poured Gao Li a cup of coffee. "No need to panic, Mr. Noah. It was a minor security problem. Hydra's base is the safest place on Earth. As long as I'm here, Hydra will not be threatened." Gao Li suppressed his revulsion outwardly and nodded. "What do you need me for, Mr. Schmidt?" Red Skull's tone went formal. "Given your excellent performance over the past month, I'm appointing you director of both the weapons and biology departments. You will oversee all research." Gao Li let the words sink in. Excellent performance over the past month. Did that mean slacking off? Or did it mean developing Shocker? Chapter 70. Author's Note on Listing. I've unconsciously written 160,000 words, and after 12 p.m. tomorrow, this book will be officially published. Thanks to my editor, Greenbean, and to all the readers who've supported me. When it launches tomorrow, I'll post a huge update, 12,000 words at once. Please subscribe for the first chapter. Please support Shijiao. Meow. Thank you, everyone. Meow. Chapter 71. Undying Golden Eyes. Please subscribe for the first chapter. While number 3 Gao Li's public persona was being promoted and rewarded, Gao Li himself, after several detours, brought Dr. Erskine to a warehouse. "This is Shocker's temporary base. It's simple, but the equipment and facilities are complete. Please hide here for now and continue your research, Dr. Erskine," he said politely. Erskine, nodding, studied the setup. Although modest, the instruments felt deeply familiar. They were the same equipment from Hydra headquarters. Then it clicked. All exposed Shocker members so far had been former Hydra officials, so it made sense the facilities were Hydra-derived. "What research do you want me to do?" Erskine asked. Gao Li hurried to explain. "I didn't have time earlier. The man you thought we'd rescued, Legendo Noah, is already one of us. He's researching a biotechnology for Shocker. You likely asked him fragmented questions before. Your task is to help him optimize and improve this technology. That's the priority." Erskine frowned, recalling shards of conversation. "From what I heard, the plan involves modifying and enhancing human abilities. Am I close?" Gao Li was impressed. Even a brilliant mind like Erskine's could sketch the outline from scraps. He dropped pretense. "Yes, this is key to humanity's evolution, our path to true happiness." Erskine hesitated. "Then why not use my super soldier serum? I'm close to completing the most perfect formula." Gao Li shook his head. "No, even if your serum is completed, it still has a major unresolved flaw. It can't be considered perfect. Gowley had already considered Erskine's serum when planning the abduction, but almost immediately, he'd crossed it off the list. He couldn't accept the serum's side effects. Section 44. Even a gentle-minded scientist like Abraham Erskine found it hard to accept criticism of his masterpiece. He frowned in displeasure. Are you worried the serum will make people look like John Schmidt? Don't worry, I already told you it's been perfected. It won't change anyone's appearance. No, 3 Gowley answered coolly. Then, Dr. Erskine, does your perfect super soldier serum still have the property of making good personalities better and bad personalities worse? Erskine paused, then nodded. It does, but that's not a flaw. The super soldier serum amplifies everything about the subject. That includes personality traits. That was the serum's fundamental functionality, so Erskine didn't regard it as a side effect and could not remove it. Gowley's expression never changed. That's exactly the problem. That, he said. Almost every human being has both good and bad in them. That's just human nature. There are no absolute saints who are purely good, nor absolute villains who are purely evil. Even someone like John Schmidt must have a sliver of goodness. For instance, he's probably kinder to his confidants than to his regular subordinates. He does, after all, work for Hitler, and even if it's driven by ambition, he probably devoted himself to Hydra's development in some fashion. Gowley watched Erskine's thoughtful face and continued. And bad thoughts are simply the opposite. Even the kindest person can't be entirely free of impulses that lean toward bad. Erskine considered this, then countered. But wouldn't the serum also increase the good part of someone like John Schmidt? If both sides increase, why did he become even more evil after taking it? That's true for extremes. If an extraordinarily kind person becomes a super soldier, their darker impulses increase too, but their amplified goodness may still suppress the bad. The reverse happened with Schmidt, Gowley agreed. But how many people are absolute saints or absolute monsters? Most people sit in the middle. Gowley pointed to himself. I'm not at either extreme. Ordinary people, whose good and bad are roughly balanced, make up the vast majority. When both sides are amplified, the balance may tip. A small vice can become catastrophic when magnified. He gave a simple example. An ordinary good impulse might be giving a few dollars to a beggar, while ordinary bad impulses might appear as striking someone when pushed to the edge. Amplified, the good could become giving away all your money even to bankruptcy, and the bad could become killing when provoked or threatened. Most people usually hold the upper hand of goodwill, but if pushed to extremes, dark impulses can overwhelm reason. Gowley couldn't accept that. Applied to himself, it would be a distortion of his original will, effectively brainwashing him. So I suggest you abandon the super soldier serum. Don't let it fall into anyone's hands until this can be solved completely. Gradually convinced, Erskine threw himself into improving the shocker modification technology under Gowley's urging. 2 months passed in a blur. Counting the earlier development time, Gowley had now been in this world almost half a year. Looking back at his original goals, using Hydra's secret research on the Tesseract, Gowley had made breakthroughs in energy and materials that upgraded Kamen Rider G3 into the G3X. It wasn't the AI-assisted suit of the future. Manufacturing in this era was limited, but the G3X armor was still far superior to the original G3. Punching and kicking power were markedly improved. The wearer felt 15 kilograms lighter, and strength and hardness had risen more than 5-fold. Combat endurance doubled, though fatigue increased by about 30%. For Gowley, a researcher with little physical training who already panted in the old G3 suit, the G3X demanded too much physically. He hoped to solve that by combining his improvements with Shocker's modification tech. With Erskine's help, the progress was rapid and promising, but a genius's limits still exist. Their plan ran into a dead end. As expected, the era's limitations remain. Even Hydra's facilities can't satisfy every research need, Gowley muttered, sitting in his Hydra executive office and staring at the ceiling. He and Erskine had concluded that the 2 major side effects of Shocker modification, periodic backlash and radical alteration of the original body, stemmed from the same root cause. The technology amplifies another species' advantages to human scale and fuses them into a human. Fusion with other species produces rejection-like backlashes even harder to resolve than ordinary graft rejection, and the subject ceases to be purely human. Erskine had looked exhausted when he finally admitted the limit. His eyes were bloodshot, dark circles marked his face, and his hair had thinned. If you want to avoid those side effects, the enhancement must be limited. Don't push it to extremes, he had said. I've done everything I can. Below a certain threshold, it's safe. Above that, there's nothing more I can do. Gowley accepted that, but he still planned to try the improved shocker procedure himself. He arranged for a clone to impersonate him publicly, while he, disguised, entered the Hydra lab. The first-era shocker technology was more modern than the Showa variant. The operation could be performed by automated machinery and felt almost minimally invasive. When Gao Li stepped down from the table, he felt like he had woken from a dream. Externally, there was no dramatic change, just a little more muscle, a more symmetrical physique. He told himself to run a full battery of tests. Half a day later, Erskine woke and found Gao Li poring over instrument readouts. "Oh, Gao Li?" Erskine murmured. "Good morning, Abraham." "No, we're three," Gao Li replied. "Want to see the results?" Erskine blinked awake and focused. "You were the first test subject, weren't you? Have all the tests finished?" Gao Li nodded. "All systems are intact. Cardiopulmonary, reproductive, all stronger than before, almost alarmingly healthy. Punching power, 461 kilograms. Pulling force, 542 kilograms. Bench press with full equipment, 619 kilograms. 100-meter sprint, 9.37 seconds. In short, every physical metric is at the human peak." Gao Li had designed the modification for perfect balance. Rather than borrowing from a single species as the original method did, he extracted advantages from many animals. The saying applied: eagle eyes, wolf ears, leopard speed, bear strength. Erskine's interest sharpened. That's remarkable. It's still not a serum, so it won't affect personality or thought. Gao Li smiled but shook his head. "Don't be so quick to admire, Abraham. There's more." He fixed his gaze on Erskine. Suddenly, Gao Li's pupils flashed a dazzling gold. Erskine felt something instinctive, like being locked onto by a top predator. A chill ran down his spine. His body went rigid. Only when Gao Li broke eye contact did Erskine recover, drenched in sweat. "What was that?" Erskine gasped. "I felt like a wild beast was watching me, like I could be ripped apart at any moment." "That's the undying golden pupil," Gao Li said. "When I activate it, my explosive power spikes. I can double those test numbers in an instant." In nature, humans have endurance, but lack the explosive power of many beasts. This ability gives that explosive surge. Double. Erskine's mind raced. Near a ton of punching power, benching over a ton, a sub-5-second 100-meter sprint, that crossed into superhuman territory. Gao Li had indeed become something beyond ordinary human enhancement. Back at his Hydra office, Gao Li sat deep in thought. With the Tesseract research and Hydra's equipment, he'd wrung as much as he could from this era. There wasn't much left to gain. If the Red Skull were a sheep, Gao Li thought wryly, he'd have been shorn clean by now. Hydra's tools could no longer meet his ambitions. It was time for the next stage. He turned in his chair and looked at the large world map on the wall. Africa, Wakanda. "You want to lead a team to Africa and capture test subjects yourself?" Red Skull read the application and raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Mr. Schmidt. I want to capture a group of black people for experiments." Gao Li replied without hesitation. "You want human test subjects?" Red Skull frowned. "Hydra has plenty of prisoners. Why travel to Africa?" Gao Li's tone was blunt. "Because primitive populations are more suitable subjects. Aside from being enslaved, their best use is on the operating table. They're simple-minded and strong-limbed. Their only real asset is physical strength. They make durable test subjects. And you know different individuals have different baselines, which can skew results. Testing repeatedly on the same suitable subject is optimal." Gao Li didn't fear suspicion. In fact, he pushed the edge because it would make him seem more extreme than even Red Skull. The tactic worked. Red Skull, a racist and a man of his time, found Gao Li's plan convincingly brutal rather than suspicious. He saw Gao Li's proposal as aligning with Hydra's ideology and racial hierarchy, and he approved. "Which country in Africa do you plan to go to?" Red Skull asked. Gao Li pointed at the map. "Wakanda." Wakanda, Red Skull recalled it, a poor backward agricultural nation, an ideal place for an operation that could leave bodies uncounted without making waves. Very well, you'll lead the team yourself. Red Skull gave the order. He did not suspect that Gao Li might have ulterior motives. Gao Li was a scientist, not a warrior. Under the watch of Hydra operatives, he could not cause trouble. Gao Li left the meeting deeply moved by Red Skull's trust. He swore to repay that trust as the organization's most loyal subordinate, even willing, outwardly at least, to help Hydra stand against the world. All right, let's start with Wakanda. Because Wakanda kept itself so isolated, reliable intelligence about its internal affairs was scarce. Still, basic facts like the location of its capital had leaked out. Gao Li's research had turned up the name Burninzana. If he had to pick a target, the capital was the obvious choice, the political, economic, and scientific heart of the nation. Everything Gao Li wanted was likely to be found there, and striking the capital would reliably draw Wakanda's attention. On the map, Wakanda's neighbor was an African country called Mohanda, and Burninzana sat just inside Wakanda's border, nearly adjacent to Mohanda. So Gao Li decided to infiltrate from Mohanda and push straight for the capital. With Hydra's backing, Red Skull's highest-level support, getting into the border forests was effortless. They slipped in and hid in the trees outside Burninzana. Wakanda wasn't weak so much as selective. It had cultivated an image of rickety, backward borderlands to the outside world. That act had a price. Its frontiers were thinly defended. Wakanda trusted its technology and its isolated position more than conventional border fortifications. The plan seemed to be unfolding perfectly. Gao Li felt a thrill of anticipation. He was after Wakandan equipment, especially the AI chip that accompanied the Kamen Rider G3X. The G3X's AI was so powerful, normal bodies couldn't handle its output without severe strain. It had to be dialed back. Gao Li, however, could push his body harder. If he coordinated perfectly with the AI, the G3X's combat potential would be terrifying. Inside a Hydra-armored vehicle, Gao Li stood with his hands behind his back and addressed the line of soldiers. I am Dr. Noah, Director of the Armaments and Biology Department. I'm here to supervise you. A high-ranking cadre like me is your best senior. The soldiers felt something off. They were an elite unit under Red Skull. Their secret orders were actually to keep an eye on Dr. Noah. No one had bothered to tell him. If you don't understand anything, ask me, Gao Li shouted. I'll explain it to you. Understand? Understood, the men answered in unison. Gao Li shook his head, unsatisfied. I can't hear you. Haven't you eaten? Understood, they roared a second time, and only then did Gao Li nod in approval. Good, spirited. Now I'll show you two great treasures. He opened his briefcase and produced a silver handgun and a small black box. This handgun, the Victory Hypergun, was built using data on weaponizing the Tesseract's energy. Its firepower rivals the laser rifles you use. Gao Li stepped back into a corner and moved with practiced silence. The Victory Hypergun's ammunition had been adapted for the Tesseract. The rounds were barrier rounds that analyzed an energy wavelength and created a diffuse shield to reflect it. With that ammo, Gao Li could build a personal defense against space stone energy. You developed this why? The team captain chuckled. Our laser rifles work fine, because this gun can kill and it can protect. Before he finished, Gao Li fired. The soldiers instinctively lifted their weapons, but the gun emitted a translucent barrier that blocked the space in front of him. And this black box, he went on, pointing at the object behind the barrier, the laser mother box, it's essentially a bomb that channels Tesseract energy. A bomb? The captain asked, and suspicion clicked into place. His face went pale. Get down! Gao Li exploded the box. Blue Tesseract energy erupted like a gatling of lasers, tearing through the armored vehicle. No one who had stayed in the open stood a chance. The lasers sliced the vehicle apart and riddled the soldiers with fatal wounds. Gao Li remained unharmed behind his barrier, wiping imaginary sweat. Lucky it worked on the first try. I was a little nervous. With the Hydra escorts eliminated, Gao Li launched the infiltration phase. Night magic made things possible that technology of that era could not. He replicated several clones and set them to work. First, a team infiltrated a small Mohandan village near the border, knocked out a few villagers, took their authentication wristbands and equipment, and used the wristbands to get into Burninzana with the clones disguised as locals. Once inside, the Gaoli duplicates scattered to gather intelligence. Wakanda's reputation for advanced technology held true. Even in the World War II era, Bernanzana looked strikingly modern, familiar to Gaoli from the 21st century. He focused on locating research facilities, so he had prepared by learning key phrases in Hausa and Yoruba, two of Wakanda's primary languages. He drilled the few sentences he needed until he could speak them without an accent, at least for those prepared lines. His behavior, though, asking pointed questions and poking around everywhere, soon drew attention. Pride, Wakanda's intelligence agency, named for the nation's pride, and rumored to be even more formidable than the CIA, noticed. It was only a matter of time before one of the Gao Li clones was cornered. "Please come with us, suspicious outsider," one agent said. Gao Li's duplicate sized them up, a tall, lean agent in front, a solid, muscular agent behind, flanked. "What if I refuse?" he replied. "If you refuse, we'll have to use force." Both agents' expressions hardened. They drew high-tech retractable spears that glowed with a blue light. Gowli laughed. "I like you Wakandans. No matter how advanced your tech, you still prefer high-end close combat." Wakandans valued martial skill. Their instinct was hand-to-hand. That suited Gowli. He tore off his shirt. Even as a clone, his body replicated the main body's enhanced musculature. The two agents hesitated. This unknown outsider seemed more formidable than his earlier clumsy movements had suggested, but professionalism won out and they attacked. "Good timing!" Gowli cried out and, with inhuman reflexes, grabbed both spears in a backhand and yanked them together. The agents felt a crushing, irresistible force that shoved them into one another. For a moment, they were disoriented and then encountered a pair of blazing golden eyes in Gowli's face, an ancient, predatory look that brought back the terrifying drills of their youth. Before they could react, a fist the size of a sandbag drove into them. Their consciousness went black. They collapsed, writhing in pain. Gowli rubbed his wrists and looked into the distance. He'd been exposed, but mercifully, he had found the Wakanda National Research Institute. His plan from the start had been simple and brutal: hit Wakanda's scientific heart with powers it couldn't match, space magic, and overwhelm its defenders with the Kamen Rider G3X. He didn't yet know how G3X would fare against Black Panther himself, but against every other Wakandan he expected terrifying superiority. He wasn't relying on a single suit either. Alongside upgrading the original 7 G3 suits to G3X standards, he'd built an additional spare. He no longer had 6 brothers. He had 8. "With my physical enhancements, stamina isn't the limiting factor for the G3X anymore. Power supply is," he told himself. "The battery life's improved, but intense combat drains it quickly." The operation was choreographed down to the minute. 7 clones would act as Hydra cutters, then don the Kamen Rider G3X armors and assault the Research Institute from 7 directions. When a suit's battery ran out, the rider would return to the warehouse and link a charging spell. The clone would then dissolve at the point of deselection. The charged armor would be sent back by magic. Fresh clones would be created at the warehouse, and the cycle would continue, relays of armored attackers rotating in and out of the fight. Perfect. Gowli also intended to leave Hydra as the convenient fall guy. If anyone asked, Hydra had backed the raid. It was a tidy alibi. After all, Hydra had sent him across the border. The 7 Kamen Rider G3Xs swept toward the Institute. Using the GA-04 Antares, grappling weapons that fired hooks attached to titanium cables up to 100 meters long, Gao Li and the others anchored themselves to the building facade and moved like spiders, bypassing outer defenses entirely. Their presence triggered alarms through the Research Institute. "The National Research Institute has been breached?" The alarm reached the Elders' Tribal Council just as they were in session. Faces that rarely showed surprise hardened in outrage. How long had it been since an enemy had dared strike the heart of Wakanda? The Elders rose as one and issued immediate orders. "Dispatch the entire Duola Royal Guard at once. Capture the invaders." Shock and fury swept the council. None of them could understand who would attack their nation's center, or why anyone would think they could get away with it. Had the long-standing tactic of feigning weakness finally failed? They needed to capture the intruder and find out why. Only then could they relax. Yes! The subordinates moved quickly, relaying the order to General Nair, commander of the Duola Royal Guard. "Understood," she replied, eyes hard. "We'll inform His Majesty at once and move out immediately." The Duola Royal Guard was an elite unit directly under the King of Wakanda. All its members were women who, in practice, served as candidates for the king's harem, political instruments in alliances among the major tribes. But beyond that, Wakanda's national martial spirit meant everyone believed the queen must be the nation's strongest woman. Each member of the Duola Royal Guard was therefore a master fighter. In one-on-one combat, they often outclassed the regular army. In sudden crises, when there wasn't time to mobilize the whole military, the elders' tribal council could dispatch them like special forces. On the other side of the institute, Gao Li moved through ordinary Wakandan guards like a god of slaughter. The GX-05 Cerberus he carried was a Gatling gun disguised as a briefcase. It had originally been designed to fire 30 armor-piercing rounds per second. Gao Li, not aiming for raw power this time, had modified it, trading some punch for speed. It now spat 60 anesthetic darts per second. The moment Wakandan guards appeared, they were hammered by a hail of darts, whether they tried to close in or stay at range. The anesthetic dosage per dart is set very low, Gao Li thought as he cut them down. Even if someone takes 10 or 20 shots, they probably won't die. Probably. He'd only ever tested on white mice, never a human. A sniper shot sent a heavy jolt through his head. He felt the recoil, but the hit did nothing. Wakandan weapons, powerful as they were, still lagged behind Hydra tech and the defenses of the G3X armor, which had a new triple-layer structure and materials 5 times stronger than the old G3. Gao Li shrugged it off. "Taste my Namu Gatling deliverance," he growled, sweeping the Cerberus and suppressing the sniper, then slipping out of sight. One Gao Li was efficient. 7 working together were terrifying. They swept through, mapping instruments and equipment in the Institute. Just as one clone reached for something, a spear zipped through the air and buried itself in the armor's exterior. 4 curved blades sliced the air and shredded the Cerberus, rendering it useless. "What the hell?" Gao Li muttered, alarmed. The G3X armor's strength should have shrugged off that attack. If he'd only been wearing the older G3, he might have been pierced. He pried the spear free and examined the head. The metal was unlike anything he'd seen. 5 bald, black women had surrounded him, each holding a spear that glittered with an unfamiliar sheen. "Intruder, in the name of General Nair of the Duola Royal Guard, I order you to cease resistance and surrender immediately." Nair pointed at him. "If you resist, I cannot guarantee your safety. You will be executed on the spot." Gao Li drew his close combat blade, the GK-06 Unicorn, and leveled it at her. "If you can do it, come on," he smirked. "Just so we're clear, I'm a committed egalitarian. If the enemy is female, I'll show no mercy." There were no more words. They clashed. The elders watched the fight via live feeds from each guard's transmitters, but as they viewed it, their faces went from confident to baffled. "Huh, this intruder, he's strange. He looks like he doesn't know how to fight. His moves are all over the place, no training at all." They had expected a well-trained special ops unit. Gao Li overturned their assumptions. He had almost no formal technique. He relied on raw power. Even 5-to-1 his armor accumulated several fingertip-sized punctures, but the small holes made it hard to stab deeper. Seizing an opening, Gao Li threw a punch that sent one of the Duola Royal Guard skidding several meters. A punch that delivered over 2 tons of force wasn't a joke. If not for the vibranium in their uniforms, which dissipated kinetic energy, that strike would have shattered bones and damaged internal organs. Nair stared, incredulous. She had not seen any metal that could take vibranium's blows so stoically. The armored man in front of her also possessed enormous physical strength, force equivalent to what she'd felt from the king, Chaka, when he held back. Even though they were using a specialized formation to gang up on him, once he struck, the impact left them reeling. Caught off guard, she was hit by a kick. She blocked with her spear, but still stumbled. "Scatter!" she barked through the pain. Nair often sparred with Black Panther T'Chaka and immediately realized close-quarters fighting put them at a severe disadvantage. Technical skill counted for little against unrestrained power. Gao Li watched them fall back and frowned at the Antari's blade in his hand. Its edges were chipped from colliding with vibranium. His attacks that might have knocked someone out were blunted, as though the kinetic energy was being soaked up. Is that a property of vibranium? He wondered. He was more determined than ever to get some back with him. Nair's voice hardened. We won't retreat. The Duola Royal Guard fights to the death. I advise you to stand down, Gao Li said, chin lifted. For your own lives. Haven't you noticed your subordinates are all hurt? My men may be roughed up, but not a hair on my head is harmed. Continue, and you'll be the ones to lose. Without vibranium's cushioning, they might already have been finished. Nair glanced at her team. 4 of them limped, and reluctantly changed tactics. Switch to throwing weapons, she ordered. The others complied, drawing vibranium throwing knives and hurling them. Gao Li leaped without thinking, revealing an absurd 20-meter jump. He soared 3 or 4 stories high, leaving the 5 women stunned. Their knives missed as he descended. Gravity added to his momentum, and, powered by the G3X's actuators, his limbs struck with devastating force. He caught Nair with a blade blow she couldn't dodge and drove her to the ground. The floor cracked under the impact. Nair collapsed, unconscious, blood at the corner of her mouth. Even vibranium had its limits when it came to absorbing kinetic energy. General, the others cried and rushed to support her, but in their haste their formation broke. Gao Li, using his armor to absorb the blows, kicked another guard into collapse. 3 left, he counted calmly as he methodically punched and dispatched the remainder. Within seconds, the remaining 3 guards all suffered broken bones and vomited blood before falling into unconsciousness. The elders watching sat frozen, stunned. The Duola Royal Guard, considered unbeatable, had been routed. That strange armor allowed a virtual layman to turn the tables on masters who were the best in the nation, even though they wore large quantities of vibranium. For decades, Wakanda had prided itself on being technologically decades ahead of the world, but now someone had shoved superior tech in their faces and backed it up with undeniable battlefield results. An elder snapped out of his stupor. Notify the army, now! Tell them to hurry! Inside the National Research Institute, Gao Li went to pick up the fallen vibranium weapons when a shadow descended from above with an enraged roar. A voice cut through. Stop! Before Gao Li could react, a massive impact hurled him backwards as if struck by a truck. When he landed and righted himself, a powerful figure in black outer armor knelt to check on the Duola Royal Guard. Black Panther T'Chaka, the King of Wakanda. Since the Duola Royal Guard had been deployed, it was only natural Chaka would come. When news of their crushing defeat reached him, he'd changed and rushed to the Institute. He stared at Gao Li and spoke in a deep, resonant voice. I am the king of this nation, Black Panther Chaka. Intruder, give your name. An unknown nobody is not worthy of such strength. Gao Li grinned. Fine, I'm from Hydra. Remember the name of the one who killed you, Walter Befenbacher. Walter Befenbacher? Hydra? Chaka raised an eyebrow. He wasn't gullible enough to believe his enemy's words, so he intended to verify them himself. Knock the armored man down, flip up the blasted faceplate, and the true identities of these petty villains would be revealed. By the name of the Black Panther god, you will die today, he snarled. Chaka moved first. Gao Li abandoned the GKO-6 Unicorn and switched to the heavier GS-03 Destroyer. The high-frequency vibrating blade slashed forward. To Gao Li's surprise, the Destroyer bit into Chaka's shoulder as if the king had offered it up, only for Chaka's vibranium talon to rake the G3X armor so fiercely that the plating cracked. Gao Li staggered back, barely escaping, and inspected the Destroyer's blade. Not only had it done almost nothing, but the serrations were sheared off in several places by the vibranium. His whole body is vibranium? As expected of His Majesty the King. What decadence! Gao Li joked weakly, but his chest tightened. From that short clash, he could feel Chaka's strength exceeded the G3X armor's limits. Worse still, Chaka combined superior skill with near-invulnerable defense and deadly offense. He couldn't win. The elders, every one of them seasoned fighters, saw it instantly and relaxed with relief. Excellent! His Majesty has arrived. With the guardian deity here, every enemy is nothing. He's the greatest Black Panther of his generation. It's only a matter of time before that armored man falls. Gao Li, hardly a martial artist, could see it, the elders even sooner. The armored man's defeat looked inevitable. Chaka advanced slowly, cold behind his mask. "You're not as strong as I expected," he said. "Are you prepared to meet death?" Gao Li flexed his limbs and laughed. "I'm ready to turn the tables. Hydra families, come out!" Chaka stiffened and assumed a defensive stance. He hadn't forgotten there might be more enemies, but nothing happened. Gao Li cleared his throat. "My apologies. Maybe the family is busy. I was trying to lighten the mood." Chaka's brow creased beneath the mask. It looked like a joke, but he had a bad feeling. What were the others doing? Watching? He decided he had to end this fight quickly so he could deal with any other intruders. Gao Li had been buying time. As soon as he judged he couldn't beat T'Chaka one-on-one, he used the G3X suit's comms to tell the other clones to speed up equipment transfers. His main body was furiously debugging and integrating new hardware. He glanced at the lab instruments behind T'Chaka and sent a quick mass message through the suit. "Original Gao Li, come help me after you've moved everything." Received. Understood. 7 acknowledged. Okay. Gaia Gao Li, can do. Ace Galiosu. While Gao Li checked the replies, T'Chaka pressed the advantage. The destroyer's vibration failed. Gao Li only had the Hydra laser pistol left, a framing weapon, and fired, still useless. Vibranium absorbed and dispatched most of the shots, and with the heart-shaped herb enhancing Chaka's physiology to near super soldier levels, whatever kinetic energy remained was inconsequential. The G3X armor, however, was being pelted mercilessly. Chaka attacked like a man who would peel armor from the bones. Gao Li fell into a defensive posture, trying to hold out against the Black Panther's onslaught, but his G3X felt like a paperboat in a storm. "I'm here!" Ace Gao Li shouted, arriving first, his transfer already complete. One by one, the other Gao Lis followed, surrounding T'Chaka. It looked like a reenactment of Red Skull's humiliation. 7 armored men against 1 Black Panther. "Are these all your allies?" Chaka showed no fear. "Come on." The 7 Gao Lis lunged together in a chaotic brawl. This time the matchup had changed. Gao Li's side had upgraded, each of them in G3X armor, their blows far stronger, capable of overwhelming Red Skull's tactics in a repeat. But the enemy had also upgraded. Chaka matched and exceeded Red Skull in speed and agility. Most critically, Vibranium granted him devastating offense and near-impervious defense. Combined with the Black Panther's masterful technique, he did not fall behind. With a sudden rip, original Gao Li's faceplate was torn away by Chaka. 7 Gao Li and Jack Gao Li intercepted the follow-up blow. The Black Panther's suit camera, though, captured the face and streamed it to the cloud for automatic recognition. The system returned results almost immediately. Facial comparison confirms this is German officer Walter Beffenbacher, the AI reported, ruling out disguise. If the United States knew Hydra, Wakanda certainly knew. The implication hit Chaka like a blow. Hydra, an official Nazi organization, had set its sights on Wakanda. Chaka's rage flared. The army is probably already sealing the nearby streets. Hurry! Gao Li still had the numbers advantage. While his teammates ganged up, original Gao Li used the moment to urge the main body on. Gao Li's primary unit had mostly finished debugging. Only the chip needed production. "Received. Coming right away," the main unit replied. Original Gao Li broke contact and slunk toward the equipment, hoping to free a hand for the transfers. He'd barely taken a few steps when Chaka hurled Ace Gao Li like a javelin back at him. Original Gao Li had to stop and catch the incoming clone. "Being up against Vibranium is so annoying," Ace complained. "Our attacks just tickle him, completely useless." If not for Vibranium's ultimate defense, 7 of them could have overwhelmed T'Chaka. Even trying to lock him down the way they had Red Skull failed. As a combat master, T'Chaka was well prepared for joint locks and grapples. "It's a skill gap," original Gao Li sighed. "Last time we surprised Red Skull, but Vibranium can't absorb joint torque. The main body has a countermeasure ready. He'll handle it before the army gets here." The elders, watching from the sidelines, relaxed further. It wasn't long before an 8th G3X suit rolled onto the perimeter. The elders exchanged amused looks. "Another one to die? Didn't they see that 7 couldn't beat His Majesty? What difference will one more make? The invaders must be out of options." The newest Gao Li stepped forward and announced, "Diga, reporting for duty." T'Chaka smirked, assuming it wouldn't change the fight. After kicking 7 Gao Li aside, he advanced on Diga Gao Li, striking at vital points with precise martial arts, repeating the same tactics. But as Chaka moved, his vision blurred. He came gradually to, only to find himself hurled through the air. What? Suspended mid-flight, T'Chaka felt as if he'd been dreaming. None of the elders could comprehend what had just happened. The new arrival moved like a peerless master. The other Gao Li's faces lit up. They had done it. Thanks to Wakanda's facilities, the epoch-making AI chip was finally complete. That's right, Diga Gao Li said, chuckling. Thanks for fighting so long and collecting motion data. After realizing they couldn't directly injure T'Chaka, the 7 clones had been told to drag the fight out and feed movement data to the G3X suits. The AI would generate effective counters. It was the same idea Tony used to turn the tide in Captain America 3. Endure, learn, and then strike with a perfect counter. 2 of us will stay and assist, original Gao Li instructed. Everyone else, finish moving the equipment. Diga Gao Li, Dyna Gao Li, and Gaia Gao Li took the orders and charged into the next room, driving Chaka ahead of them. Chaka scrambled up, eyes flicking warily at the Heise-era trio before him. Whether coincidence or martial insight, the target remained the same. 7 couldn't beat me, T'Chaka roared. And now only 3 come. How arrogant. You will pay for your pride. He surged at them. Facing the charging Black Panther, Diga Gao Li appeared to transform. He moved as if he'd practiced this exact exchange 1,000 times. With an impeccably timed sidestep, he dodged Chaka's pounce, launched a foot at the king's abdomen. Chaka reflexively raised his knee to block. Gao Li anticipated that, and before Chaka completed his block, he altered his attack to a downward palm strike. Chaka couldn't react in time and was driven to the ground with a thud, a muffled groan escaping him. Section 48. This! How is this possible? The elders cried out in unison. This time, T'Chaka had clearly been outmatched. They still have a master like that? Is he their leader? Chaka felt a flicker of alarm. He rolled back to create distance, then pushed himself up and stared at Diga Gao Li with a mixture of surprise and uncertainty. Diga Gao Li, cool and precise like a warrior from another world, put his left hand behind his back and beckoned with his right. Come here. Don't look down on me. Chaka roared and launched another furious attack, but it was only show. Beneath his rage, he was on high alert. He had to be careful and read the enemy's moves. Crack! With the help of Dyna Gao Li and Gaia Gao Li, Diga Gao Li seized Chaka's arm and twisted it violently. Chaka screamed in agony as his arm bent at a sickening angle. Ah, you bastard! He tore free by sheer force and retaliated, but Gao Li's movements were flawless, executing every command like a machine. Each strike landed in the most debilitating place. Caught off balance, Chaka took 2 heavy blows from Gaia Gao Li and Dyna Gao Li, and then his legs were locked in another savage joint hold by Diga Gao Li. It's over. Terror broke his voice. When it was over, Chaka's limbs were smashed, his body twisted grotesquely. He lay on the floor, eyes vacant, foam at the corner of his mouth, twitching as if robbed of dignity. His Majesty, actually lost? Panic rippled through the elders. What had they done? Don't panic. The military has surrounded the Institute. They can't have escaped, one elder hissed, trying to keep control. Before they could take comfort, Gao Li smashed the camera, cutting off all visual feed. Minutes later, the soldiers who searched the Research Institute returned their reports. Aside from the badly injured and unconscious king, the Duola Royal Guard, and other guards, there was no one else. The invaders had vanished, and a large amount of Wakandan high-tech equipment had disappeared with them. The elders were stunned. How had the attackers moved so much equipment under the military's blockade? How had they simply evaporated? They could not make sense of it. Fortunately, they had a single clue. During the fierce fighting, several Gao Li replicas had been damaged and their faceplates were torn, revealing German faces beneath. It seemed deliberate, but for Wakanda, it was the only lead. Cross-referencing the cloud database showed those faces belonged to senior German military officers, all with ties to Hydra. Logically, no other organization could have lured so many high-ranking officials into such a dangerous operation just to frame Hydra. Moreover, the laser weapon that had attacked T'Chaka used Hydra's characteristic tech. For Wakanda, a target for their wrath had been found. That very night, the Internal Council voted unanimously, war on Hydra. While Wakanda erupted in outrage, Gao Li busied himself. After repairs, the armored vehicle was operational again. He threw the dead into a storage bay to be disposed of later, disguised the replicas as Hydra soldiers, and slipped away to report to Red Skull. Given the situation, I could go to the US myself and return the replicas to Hydra, he mused, but he wasn't yet confident about getting the Tesseract and preferred to move cautiously. As if on cue, a new system prompt appeared, an S-rank reward. Gao Li blinked. The influence he'd accumulated had reached a remarkable level. Perhaps Wakanda's decision to strike Hydra, combined with his own meddling and the Yggdrasil Foundation's influence, had pushed the result to S-rank. He drew the reward, and his breath caught. Kamen Rider Phase, Accelerate Memory Development Data. Kamen Rider Phase's Accelerate form. Gao Li stared at the data like it was a treasure. After Phase activates Accelerate mode, he can run 100 meters in 0.058 seconds. For comparison, even running at the speed of sound takes about 0.294 seconds for 100 meters. Accelerated Phase reached speeds 50 times that of sound. In that era, who could contend with him? Now I can. I finally have the capital to face the military, Gao Li muttered, resolve hardening. The Tesseract would be his. Back at Hydra headquarters, Red Skull listened to Gao Li's report with thinly veiled indifference. An ambush by local forces had cost half the team, Gao Li said. Red Skull didn't mourn expendable soldiers. He merely waited for the routine reports on Legieduo's activity. The next day, instead of a report, terrible news came. A timed bomb had exploded in the soldier dormitory, killing over 100, including the Hydra operatives who had accompanied Legieduo. Red Skull's fury flared. It had to be Shocker, he decided. Shocker again. Red Skull never paused to suspect Legieduo. If he'd done anything, someone would have reported it immediately. The black experimental subjects disguised among the replicas weren't even worth his inquiry. To a leader like him, lab rats were dispensable. For more than 2 months, Gao Li quietly exploited Hydra's resources. He fully repaired the damaged G3X armor, began developing a Kamen Rider phase system and an accelerate device, and analyzed the desire driver and core ID. Thanks to Wakandan automation and technology, progress was rapid. There were many hurdles to recreating Phase's accelerate form. The program had to be rewritten and optimized for accelerate mode. He needed a device capable of stably supplying photonic blood to the whole body. Photonic blood was essential. The output had to be increased to the point where red photonic blood transformed into silver photonic blood under high power. It was a dangerous process. A mistake could trigger a catastrophic explosion, contaminating kilometers with degraded photonic blood like fallout. Gao Li therefore engineered a new generation of forced reaction amplifiers to boost photonic blood safely, and he integrated accelerate memory management to prevent the system from destroying the user with excess power. A cooling system, stable controls, and specialized heat dissipation structures were essential. When the work was done, the Kamen Rider phase accelerate form was completed. All that's left is a backup plan, Gao Li said. He was meticulous by nature. Since he had secretly created a Shocker faction inside Hydra to stir trouble, he would not abandon the fruits of his labor. He built a reinforced box the size of a human head, layered with anti-detection and anti-decryption measures. He called it the Shocker Secret Box. To ensure only he could open it, he transplanted the phase system's authentication module into the box. The more Gao Li studied the phase system, the clearer its dependence on Orphnok physiology became. The entire Kamen Rider phase design was built around the Orphnok condition. Without Orphnok factors, the system could not authenticate. Like an electric car that can't run on gasoline, the phase system required its native fuel. Only I in the whole world know that the authentication isn't an iris scan, a fingerprint, or a voice print. It's Orphnok factors, he said to himself. If anyone else tries to crack it, they won't even know what to input. And in the whole universe, only I can implement transformation one shot. Satisfied, Gao Li let the Shocker agents, disguised replicas, spread the secret box quietly, accompanied by a planted prophecy. Only Shocker's founder, the most holy and wise Grand Master, the fated leader of Shocker, may open the Shocker secret box. Hydra already leaned toward cultish hierarchy. Shocker, born from it, favored ideological brainwashing and religious fervor. Gao Li exploited that hunger for prophecy and meaning. In months, the shocker organization he'd seeded grew from nothing into something frighteningly real, recruiting former Hydra members and converting raw fear and superstition into fanatical faith. Wakanda's crackdown on Hydra, making the Hydra identity a death sentence, only accelerated the recruitment. Demoralized and desperate, Hydra made fertile ground for Shocker's rise. With everything in place, Gao Li drew a deep breath. The final move inside Hydra was approaching. This time he planned to seize the Tesseract himself. Leaving his main body behind in Hydra would risk purge by an enraged leader after success. He had to act personally. Red Skull had moved the Tesseract to a more secure location after the last incident, but that was no obstacle for Gao Li. The Tesseract's activated field didn't change. Using his connecting magic, he could quickly probe for the device. Standing by. Gao Li gripped the Fai's phone and felt the moment fold back a year and a half. He clipped the phone to his belt and spoke the word he had practiced so many times. Transformation. Complete. A blinding red light filled the room, and the epoch-crossing figure of Kamen Rider Fai's stepped forward in a blaze of scarlet. Family, let's go. Gao Li waved and led the charge. 8 of his clones, all clad in Kamen Rider G3X armor, thundered toward the Tesseract's vault. The approach was almost eerily easy, only a handful of guards dispatched before they could react. They hadn't gone far when the Hydra base's alarm screamed to life, and Red Skull's triumphant voice bellowed over the loudspeaker. "You shocker scoundrels," he taunted. "I knew you wouldn't give up the Tesseract so easily. I was right. I installed a proximity warning device. Only I can enter safely. I've been waiting for you to walk into my trap." Gao Li shrugged and kept moving. He hadn't expected to sneak in unnoticed. What mattered was that anyone who discovered them would be killed. The mission would still be a success. He had barely taken a few more steps before the walls and ceiling around them began to rumble and descend, slamming shut. Good heavens. Red Skull had installed a massive trap under their noses. Gao Li cursed inwardly. His recent absorption in building accelerate mode and his supposedly innocent lab time had given the enemy the opening. As the vault sealed, heavy Hydra forces materialized outside, soldiers by the dozen and heavily armed units looming in the distance. Gao Li didn't panic. Deploying troops took time. Even with preset protocols, tanks and planes weren't teleportable. Breaking the Tesseract's defenses remained his priority. He leapt, shouted the command, and drove a crimson smash downward, the exceed charge punching straight through the ceiling. Beyond the stone and steel, the Tesseract pulsed with an irresistible deep blue light. Below, the remaining Gaolis were trapped by the outer encirclement. Red Skull, landing from a helicopter with a satisfied grin, was already picturing their annihilation. Surrounded by heavy guns and cannons, he felt invincible. The G3X armor is formidable one-on-one, he mused aloud, but this is a kill zone. This is suicide for them. The clones held their positions, back to back, eyes sweeping for tanks and aircraft. Gao Li dropped back down to join them. "No choice," he said. "You lot shut down the device and take the Tesseract. I'll handle things up here." Red Skull arched an eyebrow at the sight of a single silver rider facing his armada. He assumed Shocker had gone mad. Then Gao Li casually checked his wrist, flipped the enemy a middle finger, and grinned. "I'll finish you all in 10 seconds. Red Skull laughed uproariously. 10 seconds? The mocking note in his voice was audible to every pilot and crew. The insult made them angrier and more contemptuous. Gao Li's expression stayed flat. To him, the armored ranks were already corpses. Complete. The mechanical voice of the suit announced the transformation. Gao Li's chest plate cracked open for heat dissipation. His visor flared crimson, and the photonic blood coursing through him shimmered with a pure white light. Red Skull's laughter cut off mid-sentence. An exquisite cold dread crawled up his spine, a warning like nothing he had ever felt. Muscles tightened, knees trembled, even his immortal reserve of arrogance wavered. He tried to shake it away. "How is this possible?" he gritted. Gao Li pressed the accelerator. In an instant, he vanished. Red Skull blinked, stunned. The enemy hadn't disappeared. He'd become impossibly fast. Blood-red light drills erupted across the battlefield, one through a tank's hull, another from beneath a helicopter, then a dozen more. In a heartbeat, Red streaks speared every tank and plane in the encirclement. Ha! Gowley's shout seemed to tear the air itself. Figures flashed along each luminous drill and punctured armor and fuselage. Explosions detonated in a furious chain. Boom, 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 and the Hydra troops were obliterated by the shockwaves. Soldiers were hurled screaming through the air, some landing unconscious, others broken and bloodied. Flying rock and shrapnel tore into men and machines alike. Even Red Skull, blasted by the expanding detonations, somersaulted through the air and only stopped himself by digging his hands into the earth. When the dust cleared, the encircling force Red Skull had depended on lay in smoking ruins. He spat and roared, voice rough with disbelief. Impossible. What was that thing? Time out. As the accelerate mode's countdown ended, Gowley rematerialized. The mode demanded a release. Its systems forced a return if the acceleration ran past its limit. If left active beyond the threshold, the phase system would collapse catastrophically, flooding the wearer with photonic blood and causing self-destruction. Accelerate mode folded back into normal form. Gowley stretched his neck, eyes wide. The speed had been beyond anything he'd pushed before. So fast, his clones hadn't even finished deactivating the Tesseract's activation protocols before the encirclement was vaporized. Red Skull crawled to his feet, licking his wounds, enraged. He'd been right that the G3X suits were not meant for such overwhelming combined firepower, but this Silver Rider had disposed of the army in a blink. Red Skull decided to gamble on close combat. If he could close and trade blows, his regeneration would give him the edge. He'd wear Gowley down and win on endurance. Gowley expected Red Skull to charge. He assumed the one thing more dangerous than the tanks had been the super soldier himself, and that speed had to be conserved. He took a stance and met Red Skull head-on. The clash stunned Red Skull. The silver-armored fighter was impossibly strong, and his technique was surgical. The moves were not Gowley's alone. The AI that had run the G3X suits was driving the combat, offering millisecond-perfect responses. Gowley had transplanted the G3X AI into his phase-based system, replacing its original platform and powering it with photonic blood. The AI's combat algorithms, honed on G3X data, elevated Gowley's raw skill to the level of a master. It could not yet single out Red Skull like it had other opponents. There wasn't enough data, but it was more than enough to fight on par with, even outmaneuver, the super soldier. Brother, don't panic. We're here. 3 more G3X suits vaulted from the blasted hole, the Heisei 3 who had beaten Black Panther before. Not all 8 consoles had been needed to work the vault. A few Gowlists were free to return. Their AI-enhanced coordination added 3 more expert fighters to the fray. Red Skull was soon battered like a punching bag. Multiple opponents with precise synchronized attacks overwhelmed even his augmented strength. Teeth flew, blood spattered, and his face swelled under the onslaught. A heavy punch dropped him to his knees. Before he could recover, a brutal kick snapped him backward. Pain hammered through every bone. He couldn't tell how many were broken. Gowley readied his finishing move and muttered, "Try not to play dead this time." At that moment, the other Gowleys surged up, hauling something enormous. They set down a massive base structure they'd hauled, the Tesseract mounted at its center, ringed by heavy apparatus. "What are you doing?" Gowley asked, surprised. The clones grumbled. John Schmidt changed the locking device. That son of a bitch got smart. Gowley's eyes flicked to the Tesseract and the new locks. The mission wasn't over yet. Section 50. Although we could have deciphered it, it would have taken too long, so we just removed the whole base, someone said. "It's bulky, but not that heavy. We'll unlock it slowly after we take it back," another added. Gowley shook his head, then kicked the Red Skull on the ground in annoyance. "Damn it. You're still causing trouble even on the verge of death." Blood bubbled in Red Skull's throat as he rasped a cold, wheezing laugh. "Ha! Cough! Ha!" "You'll see. It's more than trouble." "What do you mean?" Gowley asked. A mocking grin split Red Skull's face. "I haven't tested it to avoid too much commotion, but simulations show it can affect a 1-kilometer radius. There's nowhere to run. I'll be merciful and tell you. This device has a timer system. If the set time is reached and I haven't deactivated it, it switches to detonation mode, turning the Tesseract into the most dangerous bomb in the world." He wanted the shocker bastards to know the truth and feel the despair of facing death with no escape. Gao Li's pupils narrowed. Without hesitating, he pulled out his victory hypergun and fired at the Tesseract. The gun was specially designed to counter the artifact. Its permanent magazine was loaded with barrier rounds that interfered with the Tesseract's energy. Barrier rounds acted like shields, able to block direct energy, though not an all-encompassing blast. If they struck the Tesseract, they could cloak it like a shroud. But could a single barrier withstand an explosion reaching a kilometer? It was impossible to know. Gao Li had no choice but to try to blunt its power. Boom! The Tesseract activated violently, sending out a terrifying blue wave of energy. Red Skull didn't flinch. He'd be resurrected, so dying in a blaze was worth the price. "Die, all of you!" he screamed. Then he realized something was wrong. The Tesseract didn't explode outward as expected. Instead of fully expanding, it erupted and immediately began to collapse inward. The contraction generated an enormous suction force, as if it were pulling everything around it into itself. Even Hydra, after studying the device for so long and weaponizing its energy, had never understood its core was the Space Stone. "No!" Red Skull blurted, horror-struck, and before he could resist, he was lifted off the ground and sucked into the Tesseract. Gao Li was drenched in sweat. Lowering his center of gravity did nothing against that gravitational pull. He was being dragged in. Cosmic Skater flashed through his mind as a countermeasure, but he discarded it. Like the giant ferocious beast, Cosmic Skater would be affected by the Space Stone and would slide him toward its center on a spatial level. Endless style? That only made him immune to magic, not to spatial forces. He needed something else. With no better option, Gao Li abandoned his copies and detonated all the G3X armor suits he'd kept as backups. Explosions create impact. Maybe the blast thrust could free him. Boom, boom, boom. The suits detonated in sequence, producing the impact he hoped for, but it made no difference. The Tesseract's suction grew and sucked the flames away the instant they appeared. The pull surged, and Gao Li was ripped in before he could react. The Tesseract disappeared. Where it had been there was now a huge crater, like a meteorite scar. Somewhere in the vastness of space, a silver figure drifted in the vacuum. Gao Li floated there, clad in his Kamen Rider phase armor. He hadn't expected to be teleported into outer space. He took stock of his surroundings, a scattering of asteroids, no familiar planets. Fortunately, the phase helmet's extreme regulator provided oxygen, and the armor's protection let him survive temporarily in the harsh environment. It wasn't aerospace-grade gear, though. He didn't know how long it would hold. "No choice," he muttered, and activated Cosmic Skater. A flash of light, and he vanished. When he reappeared, he was somewhere else entirely. Different asteroids, different emptiness. The skill was maddeningly random. It didn't take him home. Gao Li groaned. The connection magic array could reach Earth, but wouldn't let him pass through completely. Endless style wouldn't help with this either. As he was trying to plan, a slow-moving spaceship appeared from behind an asteroid and, in turning, slammed him into its front window. "What the hell?" Gao Li landed hard against the glass and tried to get its attention. Inside, a young rocket raccoon was frantically hunting for a windshield wiper button. "Huh? Is that?" Rocket blinked. Gao Li stared. Rocket Raccoon, the talking raccoon from the Guardians of the Galaxy, a modified creature. He was part of the good guys, right? Relief flooded Gao Li. He pounded on the glass and held up his phase phone, typing as quickly as he could. "Help me! Help me!" Rocket froze. An unexpected humanoid object floating in space would normally be assumed dead. This one was moving. He looked even more panicked and faster, hit the controls. Gao Li forced a smile. The raccoon was ignoring him. Great. He tried another tactic. He typed, "I'm also a modified creature," and held the phone up to the glass. Rocket paused, took a handheld device from his pocket, aimed it at the phone, and tapped once. The text converted into a language he understood. A modified creature? Something in Rocket's face hardened, then trembled. Terrible memories. The pain and betrayals of his past flashed through him, but so did the small, precious moments he'd shared with others like him. The hardness softened. Rocket opened the hatch and gestured for Gao Li to climb in. In that universe, ships used barrier technology to separate interior and exterior, so the hatch could open safely in a vacuum. Gao Li squeezed through the translucent yellow-orange barrier, and for the first time since being hurled into space, could speak without shouting. It would have been better if Rocket hadn't had a gun aimed at his forehead. "All right, little Tin Man," Rocket said, voice high and agitated. "Why don't you introduce yourself?" Rocket sounded young, but he was sharp and wary. "Relax, my name is Gori Parker. As I said, I'm a modified Earthling. I mean no harm." Gowli kept his hands visible and performed a quick, awkward salute to show he wasn't a threat. Rocket asked, "How did you get here?" I'm not sure," Gowli admitted. "A spatial device in my hometown went out of control. When I came to, I was here." "You said you're modified," Rocket said bluntly. "Prove it. Do you have a scanner? Scan me and you'll see." Gowli added, "But move your gun first, or I won't take off the armor." Rocket thought about it, then holstered the gun at a cautious distance. Gowli readied his magic and slowly dispelled his Kamen Rider phase transformation. Light flashed, the armor dissolved, and the belt crumbled to dust and fell to the floor. "Whoa," Rocket whistled. "That's pretty cool. What kind of tech is that?" "It's not tech, just the art of waste." Gowli sighed and followed Rocket to the medbay. Two hovering scanners swept him and projected data on the screen. Rocket scrolled through the readout, surprised. There are traces of modification inside, so he is modified. The evidence was slight, and the modifications strange to Rocket, but it proved Gao Li wasn't lying. Rocket visibly relaxed, and a tiny trace of kinship crossed his face. He'd found another modified being, someone who might understand. Still, Rocket wasn't stupid. He raised his gun again and leveled it at Gao Li. "You've been honest so far," he said. "But for safety, you're going to get used to having a gun pointed at you until I drop you off at the next planet." Section 51. "I already said," Gowli said flatly, "don't point a gun at me." Rocket flinched, then felt his rifle suddenly lighten. Someone had yanked it out of his hands from behind. "What?" he cried. He spun around and saw a magic circle floating in midair. A hand had reached out from inside it. "Let me show you a little bit of connecting magic." Gowli took Rocket's rifle and casually aimed the muzzle at him. "Now, do you understand how I feel?" All right, I get it. Don't get worked up." Rocket started sweating. He raised his hands until Gowli tossed the rifle back to him. Of course, Gowli had quietly put a protective charm on it. "Paranoid little guy. This should be proof enough that I mean no harm, right?" Rocket blinked, then clicked the safety and slung the rifle behind his back, suddenly not sure what to think. A moment later, he rubbed his nose and admitted, "Yeah, you're right. I hereby declare you an honorary passenger aboard the Lila." "The Lila?" Gowli glanced around. "Is that the name of this ship? Not a bad name." "Of course, this is my friend's." Rocket's voice faltered and his expression clouded. The mood turned awkward for a beat. Gowli cleared his throat, trying to smooth things over. "All right, I haven't even asked your name yet." "Rocket." "Oh, Captain Rocket, then. Can you take me back to Earth?" Gowli's diversion worked. Rocket seemed pleased to be called Captain, and the miserable topics drifted from his mind. "You want me to take you to Earth?" "A little, but on second thought, contact with alien tech is rare. I'm actually pretty interested in staying." Gowli stroked his chin. "On second thought, I'll reconsider. I won't go back to Earth for now. Besides, I can handle things on Earth from here." "You can handle it from here? Wait, did you say you can handle things from here?" "Oh," Rocket eyed him skeptically. Gowli spread his hands. "Didn't you just see that? I'm a magic user." "Magic?" Rocket looked baffled. He was a scientific genius and had never seen magic. But remembering how Gao Li had snatched his gun, he felt a prick of doubt and surprise. "Can I learn it?" "Sorry, you can't." Gao Li refused outright, then began casting a connecting spell in front of Rocket. "Let's see. First, connect to the Hydra base. Although connecting back there is pointless, the Tesseract can't be moved over." He opened a small magic circle in midair to observe. It hid the connection from anyone on the ground and made viewing easier. The link to the Hydra headquarters formed, and he peered in. The huge crater from the Tesseract's blast was visible, but the Tesseract itself was gone. Had it slipped into another space on its own, or had someone taken it? As Gao Li watched, an almost imperceptible blue glow began to shimmer deep in his soul. He had modified the Victory Hypergun's barrier bullet to diffusely reflect the Tesseract's energy, the Space Stone, so it behaved like a containment wall. When he had previously covered the tesseract with that barrier, it was like putting a stone inside a box. When the box moved, the stone moved with it. So the tesseract, which would normally have stayed put, had been carried along in the spatial shuttle. Because of the giant ferocious beast's soul secret technique, Gao Li's soul had gained an unprecedented ability to hold extremely high-level, exotic energy. When he traversed space, his soul acted like a sponge absorbing water. The space stone fused directly into it. Between the system's protection that allowed his soul to cross worlds, the barrier bullet enclosing the space stone, and the beast technique protecting his soul from infused energy damage, that was a triple encapsulation. No way, Gao Li muttered, then connected to his New York apartment. Logically, the clone of Gao Li stationed there wouldn't let anyone in. The clone's magic was nearly depleted. It ran on a continuous spell, so once its power was gone, it would vanish. Since the Yggdrasil Foundation needed someone to oversee it, Gao Li topped up the clone's energy a little. Though he had to be stingy, he couldn't afford heavy consumption magic like more clones. After tidying the loose ends on Earth, Gao Li returned quickly to the Lila. Rocket was waiting, seeming like he wanted to say something but hesitating. What? I have to say. Rocket took a breath. That way only your lower half showed up just now was really, really creepy. But, on second look, it was like a creature with only a butt and legs. Ridiculous! Ha! Rocket burst into uncontrollable laughter, nearly making Gao Li furious. Are you some kind of professional loudmouth? I don't know, Rocket shrugged, but I think I'm pretty professional. Gao Li clapped mockingly. More than professional, you're practically an expert, Professor. Rocket cocked his head and thought, is that a compliment? Take it as one. You're welcome. You want me to say thank you? Rocket scratched his head. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm more curious about that little iron armor you were wearing earlier. I haven't seen anything like it on any planet. Can I get a set? Rocket loved novelties. The Winter Soldier's metal arm, a certain raider's mechanical eye. Seeing the phase-style armor had fascinated him. That's called Kamen Rider, but it's already gone to ash. If you want it, I can salvage some pieces and give them to you. Gao Li said flatly. Then he had a thought. On Earth, he'd been limited by the era, but in space, research conditions would be top-notch. If you really want Kamen Rider, it's not impossible. Gao Li grinned a little, like a wolf leading someone into the woods. I have a set of astronomical switch research data here, but it's missing the central control console. Once that's completed, you can transform into Kamen Rider. Interested in researching it together? Rocket swallowed and couldn't resist. Then, can I see it? Gao Li had plenty of downtime while slacking at Hydra, and had occasionally been studying ways to make a forged driver. There's no such thing as too many methods. When he left Hydra, he'd taken the research with him, and now handed the data over to Rocket. While Rocket examined it, Gao Li checked the system panel. Huh? There's a new S-rank reward? He was thrilled and curious. Was it for blowing up the Hydra base? For the Tesseract? And where had the Tesseract gone? Forget it. Thinking won't help. Let's draw the prize. He summoned the S-rank lottery device. No, I'll pray to everyone. Start the draw. The machine spun, dismantled and refined itself, then condensed into tiny points of light that merged into Gao Li, a new skill unlocked. This skill is called, Gao Li closed his eyes and felt the new effect. Ace Pilot? A few seconds later, he opened his eyes wide with shock. In this grand interstellar era, Ace Pilot was a literal causality-ending ultimate. Thanks to this skill, anything Gao Li piloted would be subject to causal interference. Any flying vehicle he occupied would be made to crash. Any flying vehicle. On Earth, that might sound mundane, but in the interstellar age, there are ship-sized planets and world ships. Destroying one of those normally takes enormous force. With Ace Pilot, no matter how huge a craft, if Gao Li is aboard it, he will cause its crash. Furthermore, the skill gives Gao Li the highest survival probability on that vehicle at the causal level. It's extremely likely everyone else will die while Gao Li survives. There are limits. It only raises his survival probability. It doesn't guarantee invulnerability. If the crash scenario only offers 0.01% chance of survival, Ace Pilot might boost that to 1%, still dangerous. Also, the skill stays active for 24 hours once turned on and can't be shut off. It can trigger crashes repeatedly, but the survival odds drop with each subsequent incident. Even so, Gao Li was ecstatic. This was perfect for dealing with interstellar overlords. In some usages, it was a god-tier troop-clearing ability. Whether the ship had millions or hundreds of millions of troops, one crash could wipe them out. A true trump card. Rocket was equally excited. The ability to crystallize universal energy into technology was something he hadn't seen even in Supreme Evolution. The true originators of astronomical switch technology, the Introducer, were no weaker than Supreme Evolution. The Introducer had gathered data and knowledge from major civilizations across the universe. It was the distilled pinnacle of universal tech. As for building the control console, I have a general idea, but the details need work. Rocket hurried to Gao Li and rattled off his suggestions, growing more and more animated. Gao Li listened, surprised. This little raccoon really was a super genius. At moments, Rocket sounded like Tony Stark lecturing on theory, and Gao Li slipped into research mode. "Your idea is interesting and valuable," Gao Li said. "I considered a similar path, but we have to emphasize spatiotemporal relaxation in the design. Within that framework, spatiotemporal distortion gradients will be used to stably focus and release energy. It's like what I noticed in my energy manipulation work at Hydra." Rocket thought for a moment. Then, why not add a graviton tuning device to guide the flow of universal energy and achieve a spatial quasi-phase resonance? You could encode energy patterns into stable information carriers. "That makes sense," Gao Li said, stroking his chin. "Let's try your plan first. We could also use a hyperspace common mode grading for localized intervention in the field." "You can do that?" Rocket exclaimed. "I never thought of that. It would allow precise selective filtering and manipulation of universal energy transmission. Maybe it isn't just Earth tech that's impressive, it's you." "This gives me a new idea. What if we create microcrystalline matrices in the hardware to give directional guidance to energy flow and help transform energy states? Thoughts?" Gao Li nodded. "Good idea. That would strengthen the information exchange between the transformee and the universe energy. And if we can perceive the universe energy state more intuitively, the control panel could dynamically reconstruct it, making materialization more precise and allowing real-time adjustments. That would improve the control panel's stability and flexibility, and the Force driver could precisely measure and analyze the universe energy field." They argued and refined the plan well into the night. Rocket felt a rush of satisfaction, pride at finally being able to show his talent. Geniuses were always lonely, and Rocket's loneliness was worse than most. He wasn't just unusually smart, he was an animal transformed by Supreme Evolution, and because of an accident that even Supreme Evolution hadn't foreseen, he'd gained astonishing intelligence that in some ways even surpassed his creator. In the early days, Supreme Evolution had mostly poured information into Rocket, but when Rocket first demonstrated real insight, tragedy followed. Supreme Evolution couldn't accept that someone had spotted a problem he couldn't solve. Rocket saw it instantly. That one moment set off a tragic chain of events. Supreme Evolution turned on them, killing Rocket's only 3 close friends. Rocket fled in the spaceship, heartbroken. From then on, it was hard for him to trust anyone. He wouldn't build new attachments. He carried the signs of emotional trauma and PTSD. That was why the satisfaction of tonight was new to him. He hadn't felt this joy before. Months flew by. Gao Li and Rocket threw themselves into research, pursuing breakthroughs daily. Gao Li wasn't only working on the Force driver, he was manufacturing dozens of phase systems. The phase systems were one-use devices for now, so the only solution was quantity. Gao Li considered himself lucky the system hadn't handed him a finished phase at the start. It might have been destroyed in some accidental battle before he could analyze it. Mass-producing them wasn't elegant, but if he could master the core tech, a one-use device could be built repeatedly, effectively permanent for their needs. Where two geniuses worked together, arguments were inevitable. Rocket had a razor tongue. Gao Li often thought Rocket's snark was worse than Tony Stark's. Their bickering could be vicious and hilarious. "Although I'm glad the Force driver worked, your idiotic theory annoys me," Gao Li said flatly. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot your fluffy brain probably can't handle this theory. Don't worry, I won't argue with a raccoon, Rocket shot back. You hairless, bald monkey. Call me a raccoon again and see what happens. I'm Rocket. I'm unique. What's a raccoon even? All right, little bear trash can, Rocket cut in. To make it easier for you, switch 10 and switch 20, switch 30 and switch 31. Those are critical information nodes. Gao Li slammed the Force driver down on the table. Those switches are complementary, but you can't be missing those corresponding nodes. Little bear trash can? Does that sound better? Rocket scratched his head, then dove back into an explanation. Listen up, genius on Earth. Even if those switches are advanced, we can combine data from the other astronomical switches. He talked for over 2 hours until his throat was dry. Let me get a drink, he said at last. If you think you can complement the data without the critical nodes, go ahead and try, Gao Li replied. Practice makes perfect. Rocket snorted. Prepare to grovel at my Lord Rocket's brilliance. Gao Li chuckled coldly. He already knew how it would end. Sure enough, theoretically 39 astronomical switches can be combined to make the 40th universe switch, but not without the 4-node switches. Without them, there was no chance. Still, that night Gao Li sneaked into the lab like a thief. Maybe Rocket has a point. Better to test it than be embarrassed later, he told himself. Using the existing astronomical switch data, Gao Li synthesized a silver switch that looked ordinary. He didn't dare test it. A failed experiment could be noisy or explode, and he didn't want Rocket to gloat at his expense. He slipped back to bed and left the switch hidden. The next night, Rocket did the exact same thing. No, I'm not sneaking. I'll synthesize the switch and prove him wrong, he muttered, and under the pretense of sleep, he tiptoed into the lab. He, too, ended up with a plain silver switch. He hesitated to test it as well. Gao Li was still groggy and wouldn't appreciate the full drama of Rocket's inevitable triumph. Better to show off tomorrow. Rocket had confidence. When morning came, Rocket called Gao Li over with a flourish and produced a miniaturized Force driver size to fit his body. Between the two geniuses in alien tech they'd scavenged, they hadn't just developed the driver, they'd miniaturized the control panel and the astronomical switches. Rocket planned to transform into Kamen Rider 4s. Watch carefully. My Lord Rocket is about to transform into an unprecedented new form. Prepare to worship, he announced, standing proudly in the center of the lab. Gao Li hovered nearby with a fire extinguisher, demonstrating his practical thinking. 3, 2, 1. Rocket inserted the astronomical switches one by one. The Force driver started its mechanical countdown. Transform, he pushed the lever, and then, boom, the driver blew, a short-circuit fire that charred plastic and electronics. Gao Li was on it with the extinguisher before the astronomical switch could be harmed. How? How could this be? Rocket stared at the ruined driver, stunned. The damage was repairable, but the psychological hit was harder to fix. Gao Li couldn't resist. Heh, told you it wouldn't work. Gao Li tried not to laugh too loud, secretly glad he hadn't used the synthetic switch he'd made, or he'd be the one being mocked. Rocket sat stunned, then launched into a furious rebuttal. This isn't scientific. His defeat left him momentarily broken, but Gao Li's relentless taunts soon stirred him back to life. Stop yelling. If you're so smart, go make the advanced switches yourself. Gao Li pretended to choke and then grinned, seeing an opening. I'm not without ideas, but we've got a problem. We're limited to the Lila's facilities and equipment, Rocket said. Why not find a planet with an advanced civilization to supplement our resources? The Lila's lab was better than most, better than Wakanda's in some respects, but Gao Li wanted more. Being in space was an opportunity to see other civilizations' tech. Rocket frowned. That would be a long detour. It costs energy and money. You don't earn money. How would you understand? Gao Li flinched. Rocket's blunt, practical view made his plan harder to justify. He scratched his head. Are there really no nearby planets with advanced tech? None, Rocket began, then paused. Wait, not entirely none. Bist Star is rumored to be explosively advanced. Bist Star? But it's not on my usual navigation route. Captain Rocket's destinations don't pass near Bist Star. Gao Li's hand settled on Rocket's shoulder, his expression unexpectedly solemn. Actually, there's something I've never resolved. That's my cyborg body. I've been looking for a way to use more advanced technology to stop being this monster. Do you want to hear my story? Monster. Rocket looked at Gao Li, confused. Did humans look that different to him? Well, it's possible. Go on. Gao Li's gaze darkened. It begins with a young man named Honjo Takeshi. Later, under Gao Li's persuasive coaxing, he led Rocket to the Lila's small bar. Rocket had learned to drown sorrow in drink early on. It was how he had gone astray. Gao Li's motives were mixed. Business goes better over drinks, and someone drunk is easier to persuade. Rocket was young. He didn't suspect the adult games. What I'm about to tell you is the story of a Kamen Rider, the very first Kamen Rider 1, Honjo Takeshi. Gao Li's voice carried a strange reverence. Wait, why are they all Kamen Riders? Rocket took a sip. The first Iron Man was a Kamen Rider. Forz is a Kamen Rider. How many Kamen Riders are there? Gao Li considered. Think of Kamen Rider as a title, a designation, even like a profession. There are many Kamen Riders. They differ wildly, but they share a spirit, people who use power to stand by their beliefs. Some are heroes who protect humanity. Others are driven by personal desires. But they all use their power to pursue their ideals, even to the point of self-sacrifice. So what's your point? Is Honjo Takeshi a cyborg? Rocket asked, still half interested. Yes, Gao Li said. Honjo Takeshi was turned into a cyborg by Shocker. I won't go into all the dirty details, but Shocker was evil. Gao Li launched into the tale of Shocker and their plans, embellishing and simplifying where necessary. For an hour he spoke. Rocket, bottle in hand, grew tipsy. I understand, so it's the sorrow of becoming a cyborg, Rocket slurred, seeing double. All right, Hick, Captain Rocket will be merciful and take you to Bis Star. After all, Hick, I know what it's like. I was forced to transform. I can relate. Gao Li had never heard Rocket talk about his past. Curious and a little wary, he asked, Who transformed you? Are there Shocker-like groups in the universe? Even drunk, Rocket's face went dark. He swept his fist across the table. Bottles and jars crashed to the floor. That Supreme Evolution bastard. He killed my friends. Rocket broke down, sobbing. His words dissolved into hiccups and indistinct cries as the pain he'd held for so long finally surfaced. Section 53. Fortunately, he'd drunk enough that he collapsed after only a short fit of sobbing, slipping into a drunken stupor with snot and tears on his face. Rocket. Gao Li was stunned for a moment by Rocket's sudden outburst and mumbled apologetically, Sorry, I shouldn't have asked. Ah, that's right, I'm going to pilot the Lila to Bist Star. Rocket suddenly sprang up, his thoughts scrambling like a broken machine. Seeing him rush for the cockpit, Gao Li grabbed him. No, don't drink and drive. Flying drunk is dangerous. Your loved ones will cry. By the time Rocket sobered up, it was too late for regrets. What? I said I'm going to Bis Star? No way. I didn't say that. Rocket's first reaction was denial, but Gao Li knew him too well and had already recorded a holographic message. The playback showed Rocket slurring. Then, Hick, fine. Captain Rocket will be merciful and take you to Bis Star. Tormented by the recording, Rocket finally gave in. Stop! Enough! Don't play it again! I'll go, all right. His face was contorted. Small features screwed up into a tight ball. Gao Li smiled in triumph. Heh, you want to fight me? You're 200,000 years too early. Grumbling, Rocket punched the coordinates for Bist Star into the star map, and the Lila warped toward them. When they arrived, the planet that met their eyes was overwhelmingly green. It looked larger than Earth, yet just as beautiful. A habitable world, but completely different from Earth. The balance of land and sea looked similar. Wonderful, Gao Li breathed. As the Lila descended toward a densely populated area, Gao Li froze. Rocket, what is it? Are you sure this is Bist Star? What kind of question is that? Rocket rolled his eyes. Of course I'm sure. How else would we be here? Then Gao Li pointed at the ground. Where are the skyscrapers? Why are there only primitive huts, grass houses, wooden dwellings? Could they have landed in an indigenous settlement by mistake? Rocket sniffed. You're such a narrow-minded earthling. Who says high-tech equals skyscrapers? Bist Star's architecture is like this. All right. Gao Li nodded reluctantly. As the Lila got closer, the settlement's inhabitants came out to watch. Gao Li finally couldn't hold back. Wait, are you sure this is really a high-tech civilization? Yes, what of it? It's not what of it, it's just... Gao Li jabbed at the people below. They look like Earth's indigenous tribes. The Bista people did indeed have animal features, ears and tails, horns or wings in different combinations. But their dress was almost entirely primitive. Many were barefoot, bare-chested, wearing only loincloths or narrow robes. Their bodies were covered with deep, ancient-looking tattoos. Noses and ears were pierced with rings and pendants. Ornaments were made from teeth and beads. Scars marked many bodies, giving them a wild, untamed appearance. Beaststar's civilization is tribal, Rocket explained defensively. You can't judge technological level by clothing. Gao Li couldn't help twitching. What kind of tech do you expect from a civilization that can't even make shoes? Rocket bristled. They have tough skin. Going barefoot is cultural. It's not lack of ability. It's choice. Gao Li gave up. Fine, since we're here, whatever you say goes. After checking that the environment outside was safe, they opened the hatch and walked out. Spears were raised immediately, and Gao Li felt a wave of déjà vu, tribal people with visible tech hints, warrior culture. It reminded him of Wakanda. The pattern of primitive aesthetics paired with advanced science felt familiar. Rocket raised his hands in a placating gesture. Unfortunately, they had no translator. The Beasta language wasn't on the Lila's codec. Did you install the Beaststar language? Gao Li asked. Rocket shook his head. No, I wasn't planning on going to Beaststar. Gao Li had no words. Two burly Beasts stepped forward with bowls of a suspicious liquid. An older shaman followed, bells and ornaments clinking on his body. Gao Li and Rocket exchanged glances. Do they want us to drink this? Gao Li whispered. You drink? Rocket asked. I won't, will you? Why would I? It could be a sleeping potion. Even worse, it might make me hallucinate little dancing people. As they argued, the Beasta seemed to guess their worry. One by one, they each lifted their bowls and took a sip, signaling the liquid was harmless. They're sincere, but I don't share bowls with strangers, Gao Li muttered. Feels like I'd be drinking their saliva. Stop being ridiculous and drink. Didn't you want to come to Beaststar? Rocket shoved Gao Li in the rear, then grabbed a bowl and gulped it down. Reluctantly, Gao Li followed, telling himself, maybe it's poisonous, but they'll have the antidote. The liquid tasted like a brew of herbs. Almost at once, the unintelligible chatter around him snapped into meaning. Gao Li's eyes widened. What, learning a language from a drink? What kind of biotech is this? The burly man who'd offered the bowls grinned and spoke in clear words. Gao Li now understood. You are visitors from outer space. It has been a while since we've seen any. My name is Regu Chi La. Would you come to my home for a visit? Several others spoke up with warm invitations. Come to my place. My house is big. You can come when I'm not out hunting. Their friendliness was almost overwhelming, making Gao Li feel a little socially anxious, but he realized they needed a local guide. My name is Gao Li, and this is my friend Rocket. Thank you, Regu Chi La. The old shaman nodded to Regu Chi La and shuffled away, leaning on a staff. The crowd dispersed, and Regu Chi La led them off. On the walk, he spoke softly in Biste. Rocket translated. Do you think something's off? Gao Li asked. Don't read too much into their warmth, Rocket said. Interstellar records say the Biste are generally straightforward. They aren't into complicated schemes, more like content animals after a good meal. Still, Gao Li muttered, this is my first interstellar trip. You never know. Rocket tossed him a small communicator. This has a tracker. If you get scared, head back to the Lila. I modified it with a stealth mode. Turn it on and no Bista will see you. No need, Gao Li said, tucking the device away. He felt more secure thinking of the Kamen Rider systems he had as backups. Besides, if the Bista meant harm, they could have struck when he drank the brew. While they walked through the settlement, far above them in space, a vast, blood-red geometric warship cut through the stars. This was Supreme Evolution's flagship, the Evolution Throne Yeleda. In its throne room, Supreme Evolution listened to a report with a darkening face. My lord, our detectors on Beaststar have picked up a biosignal, 89P13. The subordinate's voice trembled. 89P13 finally showed itself after hiding so long? Supreme Evolution snarled. Hatred and fury flared. A mere modified, low-level animal, his creation had somehow gained dangerous intelligence and escaped. Worse, when it fled, it had clawed his face, leaving him disfigured and forcing him to wear a human skin mask. Deploy the forces to Beaststar immediately. Capture 89P13. I want its brain. Figure out what accident gave it intelligence. Back on the ground, Regu Sila's home turned out to be a cylindrical tent. much thicker and sturdier than it had looked from the air. What appeared small from the Lila actually covered a large area, bigger than a typical villa. Most dwellings were built the same way. "Please come in, make yourselves at home," Regutsila said. At the entrance was a shallow pool of water that reminded Gao Li of the disinfectant pools he stepped through before swimming. Regutsila demonstrated. The pool came up to his ankles, and when he stepped across the floor beyond it, showed no watermarks. Gao Li bent to examine it more closely. Regutsila's feet were spotless after passing through. The mud and dust seemed to sink to the pool's bottom and not float. "Interesting," Gao Li murmured, about to probe further, when Rocket tugged his sleeve. "Don't keep them waiting. It's embarrassing." "Ah, right." Gao Li let his curiosity go and followed Regutsila into the house. Inside, Regutsila's family was simple. His wife Huaya and two boisterous sons, one larger and one smaller, Yaya and Jaja. The children bounced around Gao Li and Rocket, sniffing at them like overexcited puppies. Regutsila picked them up by the scruff and tossed them aside with a laugh. "We want to buy some high-tech equipment," Gao Li blurted, feeling awkward staring at tattoos and piercings. Section 54, unexpectedly, Regutsila nodded. "Oh, after dinner at my place, I'll take you to buy them." Really?" Gao Li brightened. He didn't voice the worry that Regutsila might have misunderstood, but he steered the conversation carefully. "Wouldn't you want to ask what kind of equipment we need?" "Right, I was being presumptuous." Regutsila waved a hand. "Aliens usually buy weapons from us. They're very effective. We also update and release new models often." He picked up the spear he'd taken earlier and casually shook it. With a soft swish, the seemingly ordinary weapon began to change. The shaft bulged and shifted like a small mecha. The spearhead flared with deadly light and heat, and rune-like holographic codes flickered around it. Gao Li stared in awe. There really was advanced technology here. "If you thrust, it can fire thin laser bolts from the tip," Regutsila explained. "If needed, it can be used as a last resort life-saving weapon. You throw the whole thing, and it detonates like a missile." Gao Li interrupted, apologetic. "Sorry, we're looking for scientific research equipment, not weapons. But if we could borrow one for study later, that would be even better." "Haha, no problem," Regutsila said enthusiastically. "Take whatever you like. I have a spare and a spare of that spare." They spent the next while flipping through a thick photo album that, when a page turned, popped up holographic images. Huaya cooked a huge spread for dinner. Yaya and Jaja drooled at the edge of the table. Gao Li and Rocket both found the aromas irresistible. When they finally ate, Gao Li's eyes lit up. Strange ingredients and unfamiliar cooking methods, but the food was delicious, at least to his taste, every bit as good as a Michelin restaurant on Earth. After dinner, the group sat in the yard, casually picking fish bones and talking. Then Regutsila suddenly said, wow, those look like army lights. Why would they mobilize at night?" Beastastar people had excellent eyesight, almost like built-in telescopes. Gao Li squinted for a long time before he could just make out the distant lights. Regutsila meant, "You can recognize army lights even in this dark?" "Yes, they're distinctive. We don't have an army of our own, so we rarely see that configuration. I can't be mistaken." "Army power is important. If the Bista don't control it, who does?" Gao Li asked. Regutsila thought a moment. "When I was little, our teacher said it's held by a Supreme My Lord. I think he's called Supreme Evolution." Rocket shot up from his seat like he'd been stung. His fur stood on end. "What did you say?" Regutsila blinked. "I said the one who controls the army is called Supreme Evolution. I heard our race was created by him." Rocket's pupils unfocused and his whole body started shaking. Of course, Supreme Evolution experimented on animals, driving them to evolve into people over eons. No wonder the Beastae all had animal traits. He should have thought of it sooner. "Run, run!" he screamed automatically. To Rocket, Supreme Evolution was a living nightmare. "What's wrong?" Gao Li demanded. Regutsila sprang up too, and the spear flew into his hand as if it had a mind of its own. Gao Li didn't bother with Rocket. With his enhanced vision, he could now see a missile streaking toward them at incredible speed. Holy! Gao Li scrambled to form a magic link and pull the missile back, but Regutsila had already hurled his spear. It ignited a flame-like tail and locked onto the missile, charging straight. They collided in midair in a massive blast. The shockwaves swept over the yard, filling everything with smoke and dust. "Rocket! Rocket! Raguchi-la! Are you all right?" Gowli shouted, fumbling for the phase driver on his person. No answer came. He couldn't waste time. He swallowed hard and activated his transformation. Transformation. One shot. He tapped the sequence on his hand and fed the numbers into the belt. Transform! Complete. Red lights flashed through the dust. Gowli pushed aside collapsed debris and found Regu Shila and his family. Huaya was clutching a large shield, protecting herself and the two children. Reguchila lay nearby, head bleeding, breathing hard. "Why would the army attack us?" Reguchila asked, bewildered. He'd seen the missile too late and had instinctively countered, but why target them? Gowli was silent for a moment. He suspected Rocket's presence had something to do with it, but he couldn't be sure. "I don't know. It's not safe here. Follow me. I can get you somewhere safer." He knew, however, there might be nowhere truly safe on Bistastar. If the planet was controlled by supreme evolution, Ragusila's family would be a primary target wherever they went. The missile's indiscriminate nature suggested they didn't care whether his family lived or died. "You're Gowli?" Raguchila asked, recognizing the Kamen Rider voice through the haze. Dazed from the blast, he and Huaya stumbled to follow Gowli. Then a contingent of soldiers wearing flight devices streamed in and surrounded them, weapons leveled. Voices boomed from overhead. "Lay down your arms. Repeat, lay down your arms." In the temporary command center, General Nadu slapped a subordinate across the face. "You idiot. My Lord Supreme Evolution wanted 89P13's brain intact. What if it was damaged by that missile? How will you answer for that?" "I'm sorry, sir." The subordinate stammered, head bowed. General Nadu spat and barked orders, colder now. "All troops, listen up. Find the location of 89P13. Kill everyone else without mercy." On the ground, soldiers who had been shouting for surrender now pointed lethal weapons at Gowli and the others. "Get behind the shield," Huaya ordered. Her shield extended a luminous edge, encompassing Ragusi-la and the children. Gowli leapt out from the covering. Defense alone wouldn't hold forever. "Exceed charge!" He unleashed a crimson blade of energy into the sky. The photonic blood energy cascaded outward, cutting through and engulfing a dozen enemy soldiers. At the same time, several laser shots hit Gowli. Pain flared, but his defenses held. He grit his teeth, kicked a soldier midair, and kept fighting. "Rocket! Where are you, Rocket?" Far away, Rocket trembled as he watched Gowli battle and call his name. He'd been thrown the farthest by the blast. Though he heard Gowli's cries, his body wouldn't respond. His legs felt like lead, courage drained. "What's wrong with me?" he thought. Two impulses warred inside him. Memories of being repeatedly disassembled, reassembled, and drugged filled him with terror. He'd once scratched Supreme Evolution's face as he escaped, a moment of pure rage. But courage born of passion fades. Painful memories blurred with time, and fear rose to dominance. If Rocket were an adult, he might have run back to help, but he was still, inside, just a child. "Don't think run," another voice in his head urged. Rocket began convincing himself. "I'm protecting myself. They're just friends from a few months. There's no need to die for them. Besides, I have an emergency stop device installed. If I'm injured, no medical system can save me. I'd go into total shutdown. No one can deactivate that without a password. Getting hurt means death. Fleeing is the right choice." He ran. He returned to the Layla, activated its stealth systems, and piloted it away to avoid alerting Supreme Evolution's forces to his earlier landing. But after flying a distance, he didn't leave Beast's star. He found a hidden spot and stopped. The stealth system stayed on. Rocket curled up in a corner, hugging his knees, bewildered by his own actions. He couldn't tell what he wanted versus what he should do. Back on the battlefield, the fighting intensified. General Nadu watched the monitors, his face black as cinders. "Although we've input a massive comparison into the database, we still can't identify which planet that soldier's tech comes from," his technician reported cautiously. However, the simulation shows it can be completely neutralized in 1 minute and 27 seconds. General Nadu snorted. "I didn't expect an odd obstacle, but in front of our army, he's nothing more than a slightly tougher bug." On screen, Gowli was beginning to be overwhelmed. Rocket was silent. The shields around Regu Shila and Huaya were showing cracks. Gao Li gritted his teeth. No choice, he muttered. He'd been prolonging things to buy time to find Rocket. Now he assumed Rocket had gotten to a safe place after the blast. The residual force had probably only thrown him. He shouldn't be badly injured. Gao Li stopped using his basic form to stall. He took out a watch-like device, strapped it to his wrist, and inserted a memory stick. Complete. What is he doing? General Nadu frowned, watching Gao Li's transformation. His outer armor split open, and the crimson lines that had run through his body turned a silvery white. General Nadu felt a heat wave roll off Gao Li's body, like an overheated engine, the air around him wavering. For a moment, he tried to calm himself. No matter how flashy it looked, it was still only a single-person suit. How dangerous could it really be? He forced a laugh, but then a mechanical voice cut through the tension. Start up! Gao Li vanished in an instant. Whoosh! The moment he activated it, everything around him seemed to slow, as if time itself had thinned to a crawl. Gao Li's eyes flicked to where Reguchila and his family were, and he reached out to divert a missile already heading their way. Then he turned back toward the troops ahead, lowering his stance. Swish! 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 12 cones of light, bleeding a menacing red, cut across the army and struck every heavy armament. Figures streaked through the air, shredding through armor without mercy, crimson 12 consecutive. Boom! 12 columns of fire, and the detonations of intercepted missiles burst at once, their combined roar filling the plain. The shockwave tore at the earth, and soldiers sent flying by the blasts tumbled helplessly to the ground under the lingering force. What? General Nadu was frozen, his jaw slack. What's happening? What is this? He grabbed the nearest technician by the collar, eyes bulging. His vanguard, his invincible army, had been broken by a single person. It was beyond comprehension. According to the instrumentation, the technician choked. Eyes rolling. Cough. Nadu released him and forced him to speak. The man coughed and spat the data out. His speed, just now, was 50 times the speed of sound. You're telling me he destroyed a large portion of our armaments in a single instant? Nadu slapped him hard. Are you joking? How can a single-person suit reach that speed? If it were a starship, that might be plausible, but even Supreme Evolution's tech couldn't make a one-man armor hit 50 times Mach. Nadu had never heard of any planetary technology that could do it. The numbers were absurd. I don't understand it either, the technician said, indignant, but the readouts are clear. Of course, we can't rule out instrument damage, but one thing's certain, the enemy is incredibly fast. Nadu leaned forward, trying to peer through the swirling dust on the holo display, but the battlefield was a blur. Time out! Reformation! Gao Li had already shut off accelerate mode. He couldn't use it again yet. The Fai's armor was near its limit. Fortuitously, the enemy force lay crippled, and the smoke gave him cover. He pulled Reguchila and his family into it and slipped away from the encirclement. Once they were clear, Gao Li's first thought was for Rocket. Where had he gone? If Rocket had left the battlefield, he'd likely return to Lila. The ship was his only refuge on Bis Star. Rocket treated Lila like something more than a craft. He'd invested feelings in it. Gao Li flipped on the communicator Rocket had given him, checked the locator. Lila wasn't where it had originally been. It showed up nearby, despite being in stealth. He hurried them over. By then, the Four's driver and Lila had already conked out, turned to dust, and retired. Gao Li fumbled with the hatch, then opened it. You guys wait outside a bit. I'll go in and see, he told Reguchila and Huaya, who were still numb. Both nodded in a daze. He kept his guard up and moved carefully through the ship. He hadn't gone far before he found Rocket curled up in a corner of the cockpit. Phew, there you are. You really had me looking, Gao Li breathed with relief, then half teased, half scolded. You jerk, you ran off without telling me. That's disloyal. Rocket exploded. Shame, guilt, and fear tangled in him. The smallest spark set him off. I made the most rational choice, he snapped. How dare you accuse me? I don't owe you anything. I wasn't obligated to stay or to tell you. Gao Li blinked at the ferocity of the response. He hadn't expected it to hit so hard. He tried to reason. I didn't say you were my friend, did I? At least we were allies. I searched for you because I was worried. Is it too much to ask you to ping me on the communicator before you took off? That only poured oil on the fire. I never said you were my friend, Rocket hissed. You assumed that. I've decided I won't get close to anyone again. The most important rule of interstellar travel is self-preservation, he continued. Looking out for yourself is right. What's wrong with abandoning others to save your life? Without your life, nothing matters. Gao Li's face hardened. Is that so? Then fine. I apologize for assuming friendship was a natural thing between people who get along. I'm sorry. His tone was cool and faintly sarcastic. It hit Rocket like another blow. How can you say that? You've lied from the start. You don't deserve to talk about friendship. You said you were a victim of forced modification like me, but I never saw you suffer. The gear you claimed you needed? The procurement list you gave on Biststar had almost nothing to fix biological mods. Rocket's words tumbled out in a rush, accusations sharp and personal. You probably modified yourself. You're some mad scientist. You never intended to fix yourself. You just pretended to gain sympathy. You haven't felt the pain I have. You're not like me, taken apart and put back together over and over, turned into a monster. Your Kamen Rider is just a mask. You're acting. Gao Li listened quietly, then said, I admit I wasn't fully honest at first, and I apologize for that, but I never meant harm. I did wear a mask, yes, but not to indulge myself or to be cruel. It's easy to play a mad scientist. Just give yourself whatever you want. It's easy to pretend to be a victim, just put on a little sadness at the right times. But it's very hard to truly be a Kamen Rider. He spoke softer now. Honjo Takeshi exists in my stories, and I believe Kamen Rider 1 is real in the worlds I've seen. If you wear a rider's mask, you hide the sorrowful face, the pained eyes, the tears. As a cyborg, he fights to protect others behind that mask. I am a Kamen Rider too. I wear the mask not to deceive you, but to symbolize my resolve, to carry out my will. Don't misunderstand me. That's all I have to say. Let's part ways here. He didn't force the issue. Rocket stood stunned. I'll take my things and give you back yours. You can keep the tech we built together, the For's driver and so on. Gao Li began packing modestly. Aside from data, his biggest items were a few drivers and astronomical switches. I'll look for another ship on this planet. It's a high-tech world. There must be other craft. I won't trouble you anymore. Take care. I hope we meet again. He also had responsibilities, getting off Biststar and making sure Regu Sila's family, tangled up in this because of him, would be safe. If nowhere on Biststar was secure, he could take them back to Earth. With his influence there, he could ensure they lived in peace. Rocket was frozen, trembling, unable to speak. He felt as if lead filled his limbs, unable to stop Gao Li as he picked up his few possessions and left the ship. Outside, Gao Li called to Regu Sila. Let's go. Do you know where there are ships capable of interstellar flight nearby? Regu Chila blinked, still in shock. Did you provoke the military? What exactly happened? I'm not sure, Gao Li said, but I know this. Staying on Biststar is dangerous for both you and me. Even if you did nothing, your contact with us will get you interrogated. You could be tortured, imprisoned, or silenced. Regu Chila shuddered at the thought. The military's attack had shown they didn't care about collateral safety. He swallowed and said, I know where some ships are, but the military will know too. Getting there will be hard. It's okay. Gao Li patted the brand new For's driver already strapped to his waist. I made a lot of spares, a spare and a spare of a spare. In short, we can fight our way out. He produced another phase phone, slid the code 555 on the pad, and snapped it into his belt. Transformation. Complete. A wash of dazzling red light wrapped Gao Li, and Kamen Rider Fies reappeared on Biststar. Oh, so cool. Regu Shila, Yaya, and Jaja stared, their fear momentarily forgotten, their eyes wide with envy. Gao Li grinned. His transformation, one shot, had been improved. What had once been a single-use activation had become a long-lasting formula. One dose would last 20 consecutive hours, allowing limitless transformations into Kamen Rider Phase. Chapter 81. Is there no one to stop this cheating? Section 56, September 4th, 2023. On Lila. After Gao Li left, Rocket seemed to lose all his strength and slumped back down. He didn't pilot Lila away. He didn't even have the energy to climb into the pilot's seat. Some nameless emotion pressed on him. Regret, resentment, exhaustion. He couldn't tell. His mind felt scrambled. After sitting in stunned silence for a long time, Rocket forced himself to reach out and tap the cockpit's control screen, scrolling aimlessly. He didn't know why he was doing it. Everything felt meaningless. His body moved on autopilot, like a walking corpse. Gao Li had escorted Regusila's family for a long distance, but they were still intercepted by military satellites mid-route. Wave after wave of pursuers swarmed in. Gao Li, however, used the Kamen Rider system to show them exactly who possessed the deadliest personal combat capability on land. "Exceed charge," he barked. He smashed through an armored tank with a single blow, flipped out his phone, and slammed the confirm button again. "Exceed charge." Humph. Gao Li leapt and drove Crimson Smash mercilessly through a low-flying aircraft. "You'd be courting death to fly that low in front of me." He snorted, and while still airborne, he gauged the enemy formation. "Good. They've tightened the encirclement to close range. That's basically the limit. Any closer, and I won't be able to keep Regusila's family safe." He'd attacked in his basic form first to draw the main force in. Accelerate mode had a strict time limit. He had to destroy as many enemies as possible within those 10 seconds. "Complete. Start up." He landed and activated the accelerator. Accelerate mode snapped into place, and as his silhouette blurred, Gao Li accelerated into a terrifying state, 50 times the speed of sound. In those fatal 10 seconds, everything around him seemed frozen. He moved like a force of nature, slaughtering at will. Then came Crimson Smash, 15 consecutive strikes. Explosions ripped the field apart, light cones cutting through armored formations like knives. No conventional army could stand against a foe moving at 50 times the speed of sound and using ultimate moves as routine attacks. Not even the elite under Supreme Evolution could cope. "Damn it, is there really nothing we can do?" Someone shouted. Inside the frontline command center, General Nadu slammed his console in frustration. When they first tracked Gao Li, he'd thought this unknown operative, despite terrifying gear, was at his limit. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried to run. That extreme speed was terrifying. If Gao Li could sustain it indefinitely, they'd be helpless. Nadu had even seen Gao Li exit accelerate mode once, and took that as proof the ability had limits. "We must take him down and tear him apart. Only then can we wipe away our humiliation," he ordered, confident. Then, to his disbelief, the monitor showed Gao Li transform into Kamen Rider Fai's accelerate mode again. How could that be? Did this cheat-like ability have no limit? "I'm sorry, my lord. We're really helpless," his deputy admitted, sweat beading on his brow. "This speed is too astonishing. Not even our fighters can match it. 50 times the speed of sound was absurd. Apart from Universe-class starships, who would build personal gear like that? And if someone could move and think that fast, how could anyone else react?" The deputy considered an ugly thought. Perhaps even Supreme Evolution couldn't do it. Otherwise, they would have given it to the whole army long ago. "Sir, I reviewed his combat data and found a flaw," a technician suddenly reported, stepping in with urgent news that lit up Nadu's eyes. According to the analysis, Gao Li's energy field became weaker and unstable not long after using acceleration. There was a real possibility it could collapse. If the equipment failed, that was their chance. Nadu's mood brightened. The technician's charts showed cracks appearing in the armor and smoke coming from the belt, the Fai's driver on his waist. "The Fai's driver can't hold up?" Nadu asked, hopeful. Gao Li blinked but did not panic. He pulled another Fai's driver out of the box he carried, pre-entered the code, 555, and enter on his phone. "Standing by." The old belt turned to ash and fell away. He snapped the new driver onto his waist with one hand while inserting the Fai's phone with the other. Transform. Complete. The white light of an ending transformation flared around him, but before it faded, it shifted into a red glow, the sign of a completed transformation. When the light died, a brand new Kamen Rider Fai's stood ready. General Nadu punched through the holographic projection in a blind rage, then stormed the room in fury. How many sets of that individual equipment does that bastard have? He'd been given false hope and felt the technician's earlier report had failed him. Still, Nadu held himself in check and issued crisp orders. Plot all his previous routes and determine the most likely destinations. The route simulation produced 3 predicted paths, each ending at a local hangar. Nadu's expression went cold. Of course, he knows he can't just slug it out with us here. He's going to try to find a universe spaceship and escape Bist Star. Split into 3 groups, he ordered. Occupy those hangars and lie in wait. If necessary, destroy every parked universe ship so they can't escape. Let all their effort be for nothing. The more he thought of driving the one who'd humiliated him into despair, the more energized he became. Meanwhile, Gowley's figure flashed through the battlefield like a ghost, cutting a bloody corridor through the blockade. He moved like a gale of death, leaving wrecked heavy armor behind. No one could slow him even for a moment. Those once formidable weapons were nothing against him. Then, as accelerate mode ended, "Time out," he called, shifting back. "Reformation." He reappeared, breathing hard. He'd transformed into Kamen Rider phase repeatedly and used accelerate mode multiple times during the run. The mode's extreme power put tremendous strain on its user. It wasn't meant for frequent use. The journey was almost over, but his stash of phase drivers was dwindling fast. Could he make it? Gao Li's morale was strong. He'd been cutting a path through gods and monsters, but the cost was severe and quick. His driver inventory was low and his body exhausted. It would be one thing to fight for himself, but he was fighting to protect an entire family. Careful, his sensors pinged. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw an armored tank lining up a shot at Regu Sila's family. Without time to think, Gao Li lunged forward and took the hit for them. The impact ripped through the air like an explosion. Flames and smoke billowed outward as the armored tank shattered. Regu Sila and Huaya cried out in alarm. "Gao Li, are you all right?" "Cough, cough." Gao Li's voice emerged from the smoke. "That hurt like hell. Exceed charge." As he coughed, an energy slash erupted with him, 2 streams of photonic blood blasting forth and cleaving the armored tank into 4 pieces. The blast cleared the dust to reveal Gao Li's battered form, sparking as if short-circuited. He was half kneeling, body swaying, but he fumbled for a spare Force driver. Hands trembling, he switched belts, input the code with effort, and finally jammed it home. Transform. Complete. Kamen Rider phase rose, golden light flaring beneath the visor. The destination was only a short distance away. He would break through with everything he had. With the boost from his eternal golden eyes, Gao Li moved faster and more precisely than before, driving the soldiers back. Everyone watching could only think one word: War God. News feeds across Bist Star lit up. Though rough and primitive in outward appearance, Bist Star was a high-tech world, and its media networks were quick to spread the footage. Bist reporters, braver and more numerous than their Earthling counterparts, had long trailed the conflict with high-magnification telescopes and relays. What made this battle feel epic wasn't just Gao Li's skill, it was who he was fighting, the army of the Supreme Evolution. To the beastie, the Supreme Evolution was a creator god, and its forces were heavenly soldiers. Seeing those divine troops besieged by a lone warrior felt like watching myth made flesh. It was as if Sun Wukong himself had taken the field against heaven. Of course, the entire planet stopped to watch. Across every hemisphere and time zone, Bista called friends, tuned in, and gaped at a living legend. Viewership numbers shattered records. At the peak, nearly half the planet was watching. The broadcast reached Rocket too. He'd been drifting, his control over systems sloppy, but the battle feeds were everywhere, including some universal interstellar frequencies. So unless Lila had completely sealed him off, he would catch it. The sight of Kamen Rider Phase on the screen made Rocket's dull eyes brighten. That armor was the Gao Li he remembered when they first met. Then Gao Li shifted into a new form. Plates of armor peeled back, a heat haze rippling the air. "Start up!" he cried. Gao Li vanished with a whoosh, and a string of blood-red light cones punched a straight corridor through the enemy lines. Explosions followed in relentless succession, opening a path as if the sea itself had parted. Rocket, sullen and distraught, felt a flare of genuine shock. That onslaught alone ranked Gao Li among the most formidable single combatants he'd ever seen. Head for the Space Center, Rocket realized, tracing the direction on screen. Gao Li must be aiming for a ship. But the Supreme Evolution wouldn't allow such an obvious escape. As Gao Li fought on, enemy warships fired missiles at the Space Center, annihilating it in an instant. "Ha ha ha! Did you think you could escape? Despair! Tell me how despair tastes!" General Nadu's triumphant laughter blared over the feeds as more forces uncloaked. "You've walked right into my trap." Gowlie's every move remained calm and controlled, giving Nadu a momentary pause. He assumed Gowlie was feigning composure. His plan was flawless. The Bista news anchor chimed in at the right moment, painting Gowlie as cornered and hopeless. To outside viewers, it now seemed clear. Gowlie's only way out had been destroyed. They could not know he still had endless style in reserve. Seeing the broadcast, Rocket's chest tightened. A hot, useless anger swelled in him, at himself for watching, at his own cowardice. He scratched furiously at his fur and slumped down, trying to shut the scene out. But he couldn't stop thinking about Gowlie's safety. The image of his friends, Layla, Bonbon, Daya, flashed raw across his mind. Once he'd been freed from loneliness, now he imagined himself falling back into it. He had loved and lost. His tough, foul-mouthed exterior was only a mask to hide a fragile interior that ached with pain and weariness. A memory surfaced, sudden and sharp. "Rocket, if we were in danger, what would you do?" It was Layla's voice. Rocket blinked and whispered, "Layla?" Tears blurred his vision. There was no one there, only the ghost of his friend smiling at him. He mistook hallucination for counsel, letting the conversation, real or imagined, pour out his guilt. "I'm sorry. I failed you. I caused your deaths." "Rocket," Layla said softly. He could hear it as if she were beside him. "It wasn't your fault. You tried to save us, didn't you?" "You've always given everything to protect others," Banban's voice followed in his memory. "We were grateful." "But," Rocket faltered, "I'm not brave anymore. I've become a coward." Gowlie's face cut across his mind, and he couldn't finish the thought. Lila's hand, real or not, seemed to touch his chest. "No, Rocket," she said. "Who you want to be is something only you can decide. You stood up for us when you were just a child. You weren't kept down by the Supreme Evolution's cruelty, nor defeated by Transformation's pain and fear." Rocket stared into that remembered face and saw the truth of his earliest courage. Back then, with nothing to lose, he'd acted out of a single drive, to save himself and his friends. He had no time to consider fear. He was propelled by that one sure emotion. Gowlie's words came back to him, about Kamen Riders, about hiding sorrow behind a mask to keep fighting. "Rocket, you are a good friend. You have a kind, sincere heart," Layla murmured, and the warmth of that sentiment settled in him. He reached for her hand, but grasped nothing. Still, the memory renewed his purpose. "I haven't forgotten," he told the empty air. "I'll never forget." All Kamen Riders shared one thing. Gowlie had said, they used their power to follow their convictions to the end, even if they were smashed to pieces. Rocket had not understood fully then, but now the meaning was clear, even if his own transformation device was damaged. He looked down at the cracked Force driver at his side. It was broken, but the label, Kamen Rider, was not a name for a suit. It was a name for a way of being. "I'm still a Kamen Rider," he told himself. He would save Gowlie. That thought crystallized into the truest thing he'd felt in a long time. No more excuses. Outside the ruined space base, Gowlie had just activated his latest Force driver and in accelerated form ripped through the surrounding enemy forces. For the first time in a while, he found a rare moment to catch his breath. "You're truly relentless. How badly do I need to beat you before you're completely incapacitated?" Gowlie sighed. He had expected pursuit, but he couldn't just abandon the ship. It looked like an impossible deadlock, exactly what General Nadu wanted him to think. Gowlie never relied on a single plan. This was only Plan A. If that failed, he'd move to Plan B. If he couldn't shake their pursuit and the available ship was destroyed, he would storm the enemy command center and steal their vessel. The Supreme Evolution's army had already proven helpless against his accelerate mode. There were options. Is the driver close to failing? The HUD in Gowlie's vision blinked urgent warnings. He fumbled for another phase belt and froze. All the phase drivers he had manufactured were gone. He took a breath. No choice. Endless style. But his every action was visible on the surveillance feed. General Nadu, watching, brightened. Look, he didn't replace his gear in time. Could it be he's finally run out? He barked orders. "Attack! Surround him and hit hard!" The army converged. Gowlie began to gather magic when a voice crackled in his ear on a frequency only Rocket used. "On your left." "Rocket?" Gowlie glanced left. The sky looked empty. Then suddenly a rain of ammunition erupted from nowhere and struck the enemy lines. Layla had slipped in under stealth. Rocket's voice in the earpiece was calm. "Get on board now. I can't hold you all out here. Gowli shouted for Regu Chi-La and his family. They stumbled toward the rendezvous with cuts and bruises, superficial but too many to ignore. At the ammo flare Rocket had created, Gowli flipped his phone and hit the final confirm, exceed charge. The light blade in his hand flared. With the last of the phase armor's durability he wrenched from the system, Gowli unleashed several sweeping red blade slashes. Photonic blood slashes stabbed outward in a cascade of explosions and smoke, masking their movement. It was a reckless, system-breaking use of photonic blood, exactly the sort of thing the phase system forbade. But the phase system was already on the verge of collapse. Gowli decided to let it burn bright before it died. The Supreme Evolution's troops were no fools. They poured full firepower onto the area, and the battlefield dissolved into chaos. Rocket's mission wasn't to wipe out the army, just to get Gowli and the refugees to safety. Gowli leaped into Lila's cabin and Rocket, a top-tier pilot, threaded the ship through the encirclement, fought Bistar's gravity, and punched them into space. That was close. A hair's breadth, Gowli muttered, bile rising with the vertigo from Rocket's high-difficulty maneuvers. Of course, look who's flying, Rocket grunted, giving a thumbs up. The cabin grew awkward. They had argued fiercely. A single thumbs up couldn't erase that. After a long silence, Rocket said softly, I'm sorry, Gowli. It was enough. Gowli smiled and patted Rocket's shoulder. I should apologize too. It's in the past. Thanks for risking your life to save us. Rocket hummed and nodded. Gowli wiped his hands on his pants and looked at the cockpit canopy. From inside it, he could see a thin, translucent barrier, half yellow, half orange, Lila's automatic seal for exposed hatches in space. The thought trailed off when Rocket leaned against him, sagged. Rocket? What's wrong? Rocket's voice was faint. He struggled, then pointed to small bullet holes in the canopy. When the glass was penetrated, the barrier filled it in. I got hit. I thought my vest would be enough, just kept me from being pierced. But Gowli's training kicked in. He called for the medical bay's hover scanner. The readout was grim, internal organ trauma. This wasn't a cinematic graze. This was lethal battlefield damage. Don't move. I'll get the first aid kit, Gowli said, panicked. No, Rocket whispered. There's a stop device inside me. A first aid kit won't work. A stop device? Ragusila, watching over them, raised a hand. I've heard of them. Supreme Evolution treats his creations as property. He implants stop devices that only he can deactivate with a password. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. Rocket's face paled, and then he went limp. Gowli hauled him into the infirmary and laid him on the treatment table for a full-body scan. He demanded the prognosis from Lila's medical AI. If this state is maintained, estimated remaining time, 7 hours, 50 minutes to 8 hours, 10 minutes, the AI reported. Gowli fumbled for words. Less than half a day. The first aid kit could save Rocket, but the stop device blocked any automated medical aid. It could only be deactivated with a password held by Supreme Evolution. Trying to brute force the device would take far too long. The only target that made sense was Supreme Evolution himself. But where was Supreme Evolution? And even if Gowli found him, could Rocket survive long enough? Gowli ran through every ability and piece of tech at his disposal. 10-meter dash, invincible flamehead, cosmic skater, ace pilot. Kamen Rider tech, G3, G3X phase accelerate, fours, wizard. Nothing seemed directly helpful until he remembered Endless Style's special trick. Endless Style could adjust its own flow of time. Normally, that was a self-only power for someone transformed as Kamen Rider Wizard Endless Style. Gowli, however, had another advantage. He was the Lord of Magic. Night magic. Even though in whatever cosmology he currently existed in the divine ranks might not be formally recognized, the infinite magic he carried into his soul retained the properties from his origins. As the Lord of Magic, he could lend that power to another, granting them temporary access to abilities they couldn't normally use. If he could lend Rocket infinite magic, Rocket could transform into Kamen Rider Wizard Endless Style. He wouldn't become the Lord of Magic. Some protections would be absent. But the basic Endless Style technique of manipulating time should work. Gowli acted without delay. He drew infinite magic from his soul and poured it into Rocket. A tiny infinity magic ring slid onto Rocket's finger, and a miniature wizard driver materialized at his waist. Transform, Rocket, Gowli said quietly. If Gowley hadn't disassembled Rocket's Force driver during an earlier experiment, Rocket might not have been so vulnerable to the gunfire, but that was in the past. For now, Rocket's body was wrapped in a diamond-bright glow. Gowley guided the magic through him, and a single chant rose in the treatment room: unlimitedness. Rocket's body didn't move, but the flow of his internal time shifted. In the monitors Gowley watched, his vitals slowed to a crawl. Gowley exhaled and wiped cold sweat from his forehead. The math was dizzying. Rocket's time had been slowed by roughly 100-fold. The medical AI recalculated, and the remaining window had been extended. What had been under 8 hours now stretched into a buffer of up to a month. Relief washed through Gowley. He had time to plan. As he steadied himself, a new prompt blinked in his HUD, an S-rank lottery notification. He frowned. Then his mind ran through what had just happened. The battle had been messy, and Bist Star reporters had been broadcasting live from behind the lines. With Supreme Evolution's special status on Bist Star, Gowley's beating of the so-called heavenly soldiers and generals had already gone viral. On a star whose population and reach dwarfed Earth's, a spectacle like this spread fast. To the Bist world, Gowley had just become a living myth, a monkey king wreaking havoc in the heavenly court. Gowley set his jaw. Fame or no, there were bigger problems now. He had at least a month, but he would spend it hunting the password that could free Rocket. Section 59, an S-rank lottery draw, could change the fate of the entire world and maybe the next few generations. Gowley didn't hesitate. He drew immediately, skipping even the empty ritual of prayer, and the result was good. Kamen Rider system development data based on the application of tachyon particles. His eyes went wide. This was the Kabuto technology, tachyon particles used to achieve the super acceleration known as clock-up. Tachyons had only been theoretical until Kamen Rider Kabuto made them practical, enabling a form of speed comparable to Kamen Rider Phase's accelerate mode, though not necessarily exceeding it, except for the even rarer hyperclock-up. Gowley frowned. On the surface, a new rider system had appeared, but to someone who already mastered accelerate mode, the differences weren't obvious. He had planned to spend the month producing more phase drivers, but now he was tempted to pivot and replicate the Kabuto system. The two systems' maximum advantages, though different in feel, weren't hugely far apart. Both had time limits for their accelerated states. Even Clock-Up had an overload mechanism that forced exit after a period. Accelerate mode still held an edge. The photonic blood fuel could sustain an ultimate move, Crimson Smash, with the same casual frequency as a normal attack. If he went Kabuto, he couldn't, during a single Clock-Up, keep launching a dozen rider kicks. Still, Gowley thought it through. In the rider's taxonomy, basic forms usually scored S rank in the draws. Enhanced transitional forms tended toward SS rank. SSS matched a rider's final form. Kabuto's basic form being SS rank made sense when he remembered that riders without enhanced transitional forms often had extremely powerful basic forms or unique exclusive techniques. Ryuki's Mirror World, Kabuto's Clock-Up. Those special abilities pushed a basic form up to SS. Clock-Up, while slightly lower on raw output than Accelerate mode, offered far better sustained combat capability because it could be used multiple times in a single transformation. Gowley buried himself in the development data, forgetting food and sleep. Whether he could finish the hardware in a month wasn't a question. He had to. He repeated that to himself like a mantra. The persona he'd adopted, Dan Kuroto's brash confidence, served him well here. It prevented doubt. Driven to the limit, his talent proved terrifying. In under half a month, he'd mastered the entire dataset and could apply it. Within the following week, he had built the Kamen Rider Kabuto system and secured authentication with the Kabuto Zector. Finally, done. Bloodshot and exhausted, Gowley clutched the Zector. For a moment, all he felt was the power now in his hands. He planned one thing next: get some rest, then go to Bist Star. General Nadu's forces were stationed there, and as the Supreme Evolution's direct garrison, they would know the coordinates. Gowley intended to recover the coordinates from them and then fight his way to the Supreme Evolution. Sleep first, S-attribute burst recovery, then back to work. The next day, he arrived near the Supreme Evolution's military base, rested and alert. He stretched, yawned, and buckled the Zector to his side. Time to make the enemy regret today, he muttered. The Zector circled him, catching the sunlight as he raised his hand. It landed in his palm. A mechanical roar swelled as hive-like motes of light gathered and formed armor around him. Deliberately, Gao Li lifted the Zector's horn. A warning tone sounded, like an arrival announcement, and unmasked, he strode straight toward the base entrance. Soldiers poured out and surrounded him, guns trained. "State your identity," an officer barked. Gao Li didn't wait. He snapped the horn. "Cast off. Change beetle." Armor plates split and burst outward like a transforming mech. Sections shot off and became high-speed, super-hard projectiles. The shrapnel stormed through the surrounding troops. Screams, bones breaking, men falling where they stood. Some never had the chance to react. When the carnage ended, Gao Li tapped the buckle. "Clock up!" Like a ripple in the air, he vanished. Reinforcements arriving a moment later stared at each other, bewildered. Their quarry was gone. In the base command room, the footage played on a loop. General Nadu sat rigid, eyes bloodshot with anger. "Another one," he hissed. "Another damn one." Why did so many insurgents dare to humiliate him? The worst part was his temporary inability to stop them. The armored man with silver lines before had used a blood-red light cone with extraordinary penetrative power. One strike had destroyed even their best weapons. Now this new intruder was different, but just as maddeningly fast. "Could he be invisible?" an aide ventured. Nadu shook his head. "We checked. Ultra-slow motion and high magnification show nothing. He's simply too fast." He slammed his fist on the table. A grand army, helpless against a single man, humiliating. The staff conferred. "We might trap him in a confined space, or use a wide-area strike he can't evade," suggested the chief of staff. "All difficult," Nadu said. "A wide-area strike would give a speedster time to escape. Confined space traps sometimes worked, but not against a rider's offensive capability. If they could break through a sealed room, the bait was useless. Even if they could lure him somewhere closed, the enemy might batter his way out. Maybe this one's easier, only speed, not the same brute force as the prior one," an aide offered cautiously. "That's possible," Nadu admitted. "Another possibility is that this single-person equipment isn't mass-produced. If he lacks replacements, invading us alone could be his biggest mistake." His theory had reason. The base's database contained no matching records for either Kamen Rider Phase or Kamen Rider Kabuto. These designs and activation signatures were unknown in their files. Section 60 General Nadu's deductions made sense. Those two kinds of individual combat equipment had probably never been mass-produced on any planet. They were likely secret technologies of some faction, manufactured only in small numbers. Gao Li's observation that a phase driver had run out of power on the battlefield supported that conclusion. And whatever mysterious tech allowed someone to accelerate so drastically couldn't be used continuously. Unless it broke the laws of physics, it would inevitably overheat and overload. The more Nadu thought, the more confident he became. If we wait until the invaders show themselves again and their armor shows signs of overload or damage, we will. Before he could finish, the command room door slammed with a deafening bang. "What?" Everyone turned, startled. The steel door was deformed inward, the dent shaped like a fist. No one in the base could have made such an imprint. There was only one possibility: the invader. "Impossible! How could he get in so fast?" General Nadu exclaimed. The command room was at the innermost core, constantly guarded by heavily armed troops. There had been no sounds of battle, no reports of contact. Another tremendous bang shook the room, this time a kick. The doorframe buckled. Panic tightened everyone's chests. Nadu activated the call bell for reinforcements. A third thud rang out, a muffled, bone-jarring impact. The door disintegrated under the assault and was kicked open. "Here's Johnny." Gao Li stepped through the shattered frame with a cold, casual tone. Cold sweat broke out on every face. A few people screamed. General Nadu, though, quickly shoved down his fear and replaced it with humiliation and anger. He rallied his composure. "Don't panic. The reinforcements will be here any moment. This guy must be out of accelerate mode." If he hadn't been out of it, he wouldn't have kicked the door. He would have come in and killed us before we reacted. Nadu spoke with the swagger of a detective revealing the obvious, and the others took heart. It made a perverse kind of sense. A forced, noisy entry proved he could no longer use that extreme speed. Gao Li only sighed. "How foolish. My friend is dying, and I'm in a terrible mood. Or maybe, he enunciated each word slowly, I didn't fail to use it because I couldn't. I didn't use it on purpose, to savor the panic and confusion I just watched. Nadu began, but Gao Li pressed a button at his side. Clock up. Everything around him slowed instantly. Clock up worked differently from accelerate mode. It sped up the particles around the user so their personal time flowed faster. In Gao Li's accelerated perception, the soldiers' hands rose toward their weapons, but their fingers never closed. The millimeters between finger and trigger became an insurmountable gulf. Gao Li walked into the almost frozen formation. With a casual flick, he sent one soldier flying in slow motion. The soldier's blood did not have time to gush before his momentum carried him into another, who then struck another and another. The impacts were scaled to injure but not utterly destroy, enough to clear a path. In that frozen accelerated window, Gao Li weaved through the room and sent dozens of bodies flying like ragdolls. In the original Kamen Rider Kabuto system, Clock Up had an automatic cutoff for two reasons: to prevent physical strain on the wearer and to stop the rider system from overheating. The user's physical condition was the primary limiter. A stronger body allowed a longer clock-up duration. Gao Li's body, modified and near-peak human in every metric, even without his eternal undying golden eyes, could maintain clock-up far beyond an ordinary rider. The system's cutoff was pushed outward. Before any software limit triggered, Gao Li had already shredded the incoming reinforcements. Clock over. He reappeared amid scattered soldiers. For a moment, it felt like a combination of forces had slammed into time itself. The command room emptied in a heartbeat. Only General Nadu and a few high-ranking officers remained, staring at one another in dumb silence. Their expected relief force had been annihilated in an instant. Gao Li chuckled, raising the Kamen Rider Kabuto kunai gun. After a beat of stunned silence, an advisor dropped to his knees and begged, "Mercy, my lord." "I prefer not to," Gao Li replied. He put a bullet through the man's head without hesitation, uninterested in prolonging things. He spared only the adjutant and General Nadu. Their uniforms were finer, their rank obvious. The adjutant's lips trembled, his lower body was soaked from fear. Gao Li knocked him unconscious, then kicked Nadu to the floor. "You heard me. I'm in a very bad mood. Tell me something useful. The coordinates of Supreme Evolution, their troop strength, spaceship layout, weapons configurations, everything." Nadu shivered, but tried to hold his ground. "Who would tell you? Ah!" Gao Li broke his left pinky on the first word. "Don't lie, I'll ask your adjutant too." Nadu whimpered and babbled nonsense. Gao Li snapped his left thumb. Nadu screamed, tears and snot mixing into a stinking stream. Gao Li continued, methodical and cold. "You're not human, but you still have 10 fingers and 10 toes. You wouldn't tell me until they're all broken, right?" Gao Li mused aloud, then broke the right pinky. "Even if you break them all, they aren't useless. There's another kind of pain, crushing. After I break every finger and toe, I'll crush them at the joints, one by one, and if that finishes them, you still have other bones." He spoke as if narrating someone else's experiment. He snapped 7 of Nadu's fingers in succession. Nadu alternated between whimpers and curses, then finally begged. Gao Li ignored him until every finger was finished. Only then did he cease. "I apologize," Gao Li said in a measured tone. "I was angry, and I haven't been sleeping. Did you want to say that again?" Nadu shook all over. His dread of Gao Li now eclipsed any fear of Supreme Evolution. This man before him was a demon, not just ruthless, but clinical and utterly composed. I'll tell you," Nadu gasped. "Please, stop. Kill me afterward." Gao Li nodded. He extracted every scrap of information Nadu knew, then knocked him unconscious and revived the adjutant. With a smile that chilled the man to his soul, Gao Li asked polite questions and, amid the adjutant's screams, obtained everything he wanted. The two accounts matched. Satisfied, Gao Li granted them the death they had begged for, quick and merciful by his standards. "Sigh," he murmured as he left. "If only they'd handed over the emergency stop deactivation code, I wouldn't have to go to Supreme Evolution personally." Back aboard Lila, Gao Li checked Rocket on the treatment table and forced himself to shake off fatigue. Even with his exceptional stamina, repeated clock-up use accumulated strain. He set the ship's course. Set destination, Supreme Evolution, Evolution Throne Yeleda. After a proper rest, I'll go in and out 7 times. Rocket still has some time. Before I go, I'll make some preparations. The deactivation code for the emergency stop device would be valuable beyond measure. Gowli wanted to extract more than coordinates. Knowledge of their modification tech could perfect his own work. Chapter 85, Shocked Supreme Evolution Throne. Yalida loomed like a geometric puzzle in space, a colossal universe-class vessel made of interlocking shapes. Surprisingly, the exterior bore almost no long-range weapons. Supreme Evolution either trusted their biological creations utterly or had grown arrogant enough to scorn traditional armaments. Yalida's defense lay with biology. The Hell Legion. The Hell Legion looked ripped from Thulu mythos, monstrosities of flesh and machine, bioengineered horrors. Each could fight in space or on planetary surfaces. They flew, navigated the void, and carried amplified strength. Supreme Evolution's expertise in biotech was undeniable. In raw combat capability, the Hell Legion might even rival Thanos' vanguard.